When you get to Topgun, you think you know how to fly your airplane. And you get there, and right away what you realize is you are nowhere near maximizing the ability of this machine. I went to Topgun in a peacetime military. Desert Storm was 91. We hadn't done anything in 10 years. I come back as an instructor in a wartime military. If we want them to be prepared for war, you got to make the training harder. Longer, more difficult, more demanding, higher bar. Day of prep, a day to fly. Day to prep, day to fly. That's varies. Sometimes you're flying 5 days in a row. You come back and you debrief for 5 or 6 hours. You're there at 5 in the morning and you're leaving at 5 at night. And then it's right back into the next day.
That amount of debrief, there's part of me that kind of internally asks, how is there that much to talk about?
It's a good question. It's the right question to ask.
I have 4 dogs, and they've eaten all types of different food, and we recently found Team Dog, I believe this spring, so we've been on it for a year. Seeger was on it first, and Tiller was on it, and then we put the Goldens on it, and all the dogs eat less food, the dogs' coats are way better. Everything about Team Dog is, I'm very impressed. My dog trainer, Justin Allen, he uses it on all 60 dogs that are there for training. He's tried every single food in the game too, and they just stay super healthy on this Team Dog.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He's a Marine Corps officer. He was the pilot of F-16s, 18s, 22s, and 35s. He was a Topgun instructor, which, we're going to have to get to the bottom of that. Chief Development Officer at Echelon Front, and he's the author of The Need to Lead, a Topgun instructor's lesson on how leadership solves every challenge, and Volume 3 of the Extreme Ownership series from Jocko. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Dave Berke.
It's good to be here, man. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, totally.
I appreciate the connection through Jocko, and I know you're full speed ahead there, so I appreciate you carving the time to come here and sit down with us.
Easy.
What's the last book that you've read other than your own?
Oh, man. I did a bunch of reading of a pretty wide range of leadership books as I prep for writing mine. Everything from basic stuff like Carnegie, and then going back over Jocko and Leif's books to get some formatting. So I got a bunch in my head that are somewhat recent, just trying to think about how to write. None of them were super helpful because I eventually had to get my own thoughts out of my head, but a lot of that stuff.
Is there a non-fiction book that you've read in the last year?
I have not touched fiction I cannot remember the last time I looked at a fiction book.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I read a fair bit, but none of it's fiction.
Not lately. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah. What's something you wish you were better at?
Oh, dude. Since we're on the subject, I am not a good writer.
Really?
No, it's certainly not naturally good. That process, and you've done it enough now, and I don't know what it was like for you, but I had this thought I understand it in my head, what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
I didn't think it'd be, and writing things down that are in your head, man, I struggled with that. And even now, as I read what I wrote, I'm pretty critical of, I just am not a naturally good writer. And I wish I could just do a better job just getting what's in my head out on paper.
Yeah, I think for me, the challenge is the flow of the overall story. I think, a lot of guys that, sit in that chair, or I would even consider myself at least competent at communicating, in written format. But telling a single story is one thing. Trying to have something where it flows in a manner where it doesn't seem like you're bouncing all over the place or contradicting yourself, or to me, that's the challenge of writing a full 200-page book,
Yeah. I had the exact same experience.
Yeah.
And I would tell a story. If I was talking to you, it'd take me 30 seconds to tell the story. That's, a paragraph.
Yeah.
It doesn't cut it. So I wish I was better at that.
Yeah. If time travel were possible, where and when would you go?
I don't know how cliche this sounds, but I'd be a fighter pilot in World War II, without a doubt. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
What, any specific front or platform?
Yeah, I got to be careful as a Marine. I would certainly, the canned answer is I'd be flying Corsairs off carriers as a Marine.
Yeah. But the reality,
The reality is I'd probably be flying P-51s in Europe.
Yeah.
That is just to me kind of like just the iconic American story of the battle in Europe and the American air forces that supported that. So all the Marines know I'd fly Corsairs for the Marine Corps, but
Yeah.
I'd be a P-51 pilot in World War
Yeah.
II, without a doubt.
do you know off the top of your head what the kill ratio was back then, and how many pilots there were?
I don't. Those are good numbers. We did a podcast with a guy named Bud Anderson who has since passed away, but he was more than a trip. He had 16 and a half kills in a P-51. Started flying at like 21 or 22 years old in Europe, and the arc of how things were at the beginning to how things were at the end changed pretty dramatically.
Yeah.
Incredible amount of losses up front. I don't know what those numbers are, but they're dramatic.
Yeah, yeah. One of the really interesting things, I don't remember where I saw it, but it was talking about how they determined or ultimately determined where to augment armor plating on planes was where you didn't see bullet holes, which I think there's so many, like even leadership analogies that I think you can use from that example. It's just such a fascinating story.
Totally counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
It's a great point. Totally, just like leadership is counterintuitive. You put the armor, the opposite of where you think the hits would be. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite quote?
Oh, man. I can't name one single. I mean, the thoughts that go around in my head, and I think it's varied based on kind of what the conversation is. I have 3 or 4 go-tos depending on the circumstance. And I think to say I have one individual one wouldn't do it justice, but there's 3 or 4 that I definitely lean on depending on the circumstance or who I'm talking to for sure.
Yeah. Does one come to mind?
The thing that just came to mind when you said it and when you asked it, it's probably because I've been spending a lot of time talking to my kids lately, is something I stole from my mom, is someone's going to do it, it might as well be you, which was this idea that my mom always had when I was a kid growing up, and I'd have these big lofty dreams about doing things that seemed out of reach. And her version of that was like, every job out there is done by a regular, normal person. Like, everybody's normal. You're a regular person. You can do anything you want. And the way she said that, when I'd come in and say, hey, I want to do this, she's like, well, someone's going to do it. It might as well be you. I have plagiarized that throughout my adult life, and I've been saying it a lot lately as my kids are getting older. It just happens to be a central thing with where I am. I say that a lot these days.
Do they ever push back? And they're like, why does it have to be me? Like, I don't want to take the trash out, so why don't I let somebody else do it?
Yeah, I probably use it in too many optimistic roles. Now it's like, someone's going to do it. It's going to be you. Yeah.
If you could immediately ban one app, what would it be?
Okay. Is it just one?
I mean,
yeah, dude. I mean, we were talking about this before. I certainly see this. 3 teenage kids, or 2 teenage girls and a 12-year-old. But man, I mean, social media right now certainly cuts both ways. There are obviously some wonderful things about it. There are some drawbacks to it. It would be probably easy to just say, ban social media or get rid of this particular app. I guess that's probably a little too general to say that, but I struggle with the desire for like the instant interaction that my kids seem to be really tend towards. And it's the same thing that I find myself doing too. And I struggle with it because there's a lot of upside to it, but man, that stuff is a challenge. The algorithm is crazy.
it is. I mean, I've seen both statistically and just kind of anecdotally I think the assumption from navigating social media is that this country is on the brink of civil war and we're enormously divided. But it's like the reality is neither of those things, but the algorithm has convinced almost everybody that that's actually the case, and I mean, I don't think you could possibly look at that and think that there isn't some sort of design behind that by someone or an entity of some sort. The question is why, because a strong America, I think, benefits the world, pretty obviously,
Yes.
know, and so it's like I can't imagine it would be an American-born entity. Like there's nothing that makes sense there. The fact that there's not, I mean, with the amount of tech power and ingenuity and like the frontiership of the tech space here in the United States, I also don't understand how they didn't see that coming or haven't found a way to mitigate that. So like there's a lot of unanswered questions that just there's not an answer that really makes sense.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. And for me, I've got that macro view you were just talking about, and I'll see it sometimes. I'll walk in and my daughter will come home from school and she'll be kind of curled up on a ball on the sofa and she's like thinking she's decompressing from a day at school. And I just look over and I'm like, man, her body language, her demeanor, and I don't even know what she's doing. She's not doing a ton of social media. She's just kind of catching up on what's going on. And dude, how quickly that kind of pulls her into this place where I got to snap her out of that on a regular basis. Yeah. And you magnify that times, just like you talked about. Dude, there's a danger in there. And when you're offsetting like the pros, which I know there's great things about it, what it does to the demeanor of the people that I see is interacting with is pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's pretty dramatic.
Well, I think we're very fortunate. I imagine we're close in age to have grown up without it,
Totally.
but are young enough to benefit from it.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's the best of both worlds.
Yep.
Like the Gen X time frame, I think, is a pretty special generation to be a part of, and I'm very thankful that I am. But yeah, I see. I mean, my kids are a little older than yours, but it's just, man, you see the impacts it has, and it's just devastating.
Dude, it's crazy. 100%.
Yeah. Where are you originally from?
I grew up in Southern California. Technically, I was born in New York, but I moved to SoCal when I was probably maybe a year and a half old. And between San Diego and South Orange County, I moved back and forth, but I call Southern California home.
Yeah. Were you a military family?
No, not at all. Like
Really?
Zero. Like not a single relative, not even a distant relative that I'm aware of had any connection to the military.
What did your parents do?
So my dad was and is still an eye doctor, and my mom was a school teacher.
Oh, wow.
So
Siblings?
yeah, I got an older sister. She's a nurse. I have a younger sister. She's also a nurse.
Oh, wow.
Kind of random.
How would you kind of summarize or encapsulate your childhood from kind of a general experience standpoint?
I would describe it as like very unremarkable. I felt like I lived, and listen, we talk about these generational things. You even just alluded to it, that the sweet spot of the world that we grew up in. My parents were divorced. And when I say unremarkable, like that wasn't uncommon. I lived in a time and I don't know again those numbers either, but I certainly wasn't like the only kid whose parents got divorced. My parents got divorced when I was like 6 or something, young, pretty young. And in my mind, like I lived like a very normal life. And if I look back, I just would describe it as like almost like boring.
Yeah.
I had a couple things happen in my life that were like very remarkable to me, but if I were to describe like my upbringing and just what happened in my life, how I lived it and how I grew up, unremarkable.
Yeah. Did you, like from a tradition standpoint, were there things that your family did that stand out as, or nothing remarkable there?
No. And I got to be careful as I say this because I don't want to diminish that. And I would say in some ways I am raising my family and living a very different life from what I grew up with, traditions, things that we're doing that I never did. My parents got divorced. My mom was pretty much for the most part, a single mom. I was, the term latchkey kid. Like I was a straight up, like no joke, latchkey kid. Walked myself to school in the morning, came home, unlocked the door, would call my mom at where she was substituting or teaching that day. For years, that was kind of how it was. And a lot of independence, a lot of autonomy, a lot of freedom. But it all seemed like very typical. So I didn't have any sense of that as an adult now, not what I wanted, not what I'm doing with my kids. But, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I don't look back and have anything that stand out that was like seminal to the way I was raised or how we were, traditions, things like that. Nothing.
Wow.
Nobody's ever asked me that, so it's an interesting question, but nothing pops into my mind about it. Like this is how things were. It just wasn't like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that overwhelmingly and largely our society has lost, that I think are super, super important and way undervalued for the fabric of a society to stay strong, is having a national culture, generally speaking. Of course, there's nuance and differences, but having things that are traditions, that are, cultural regularities that you are very intentional with, and whether it's Sunday dinners or specific things for Thanksgiving or whatever it is, I think those things are really important. And we did a fair number of those, and it's something I look back on very fondly. And I think that's one of the things that starts the breakdown of society when nobody really gives a shit about, doing any of those
Yep.
things, and that's where people get selfish and families break up and nobody cares, and it turns into this like apathetic, lethargic society that nobody cares to protect.
Yeah.
What were the remarkable things that did happen?
I that comment to me is super important, and I did not have a sense of that until I became an adult and got married. If you ask, if my wife was sitting here, they had traditions and things that we do now, like we have family dinners. Thanksgiving is a big one. Like if you think about certain holidays or times that we're together, making a big deal out of us being together, incorporating friends and family. Like we are doing things very differently in my adulthood than I did growing up for that exact reason. Because I did not understand and overlook the value of it until I became an adult, looking at what I wanted for my kids. And again, I don't mean to be critical about how I grew up. Obviously, like I had a great upbringing and things worked out really well in my life. But the things that I would place value on now that I do as a father and as a husband, I thought you described it really, really well. That is super important to me. I learned that in adulthood. And what I think is true, and I hope is true, is that by instilling that in my kids, that will just become normal to them.
Yeah.
To me, it's a big thing. Like, oh, I get to do these things that I never did. My wife, not to say she took it for granted, but that's very much how it was for her. I want that value to be placed on in our home, with our community, friends, neighbors, things like that, to have that real thread of that fabric really, really tight. I am very deliberate about that.
Yeah.
It's super important to me.
Yeah, same here. I love it. I mean, it's one of the things I look forward to the most, I would say, throughout the year. You did mention that a couple of things remarkable did happen.
Yeah.
What were they?
Probably in things that are certainly outside of my control, probably the most influential thing that happened to me is when I moved from San Diego to Orange County. I'm probably right around 5.5, 6 years old. We moved to a town called El Toro, which back in the 70s, this is like probably 79, somewhere around there, was home to the Marine Corps' West Coast Fighter Base. So I grew up literally about a mile off the flight line, the flight path. So I moved there 5, 6 years old, and every day for my entire childhood growing up to adulthood was underneath the flight path. And all of a sudden, Marines and jets became literally part of my day-to-day life. You could not look up into the sky without seeing it every single day. That clearly got into my bloodstream. Totally random circumstance. That was influential, and that really became part of all the things I became in the future was a result of that. Totally random event.
Wow. Was there a light switch moment as far as that influence making you decide this is what I want to do, or was it gradual?
Probably both. So I think the gradual part of it, these are good questions, man, as I think about this. The gradual part of it is when something kind of gets in your bloodstream, I'm literally picturing, looking, I can see even like the orientation of the airplanes. That became kind of normalized, and I liked airplanes. I was fascinated by the jets. Then there'd be an air show every year, and we'd go to the air show. My mom would take me. Sometimes I'd ride my bike, like seeing that and like really up close in person. The movie Top Gun comes out, you see it. But I did meet, his name's Aaron Irvin. I like certain people that I met in my life at 16 years old. He was a Marine, and I met him, and he was someone that these ideas, these kind of lofty ideas of, oh, I see the jets, I see the Marines, I see the military, it's all really cool to me. He made it real. So as a real person, I could look him in the eye, I could talk to him, we had an interaction with him. He was a neighbor, he's a friend, huge mentor and influence to me, family man, had a great family, wife and kids and stuff like that. He's the one that took this idea or this fantasy about it and explained to me how things actually worked. And so there's a couple of very specific moments, and he was central to that, where the ideas became more practical, like, okay, do this, talk to this person, meet with this person, you got to do this stuff in school, those type of things. And all of a sudden, the ideas become a little more realistic, and you get on a path of doing those things. I think the blend of those two is what set me down the path of doing what I ended up doing.
Yeah. And I mean, did you know for sure, like even in high school, I want to be a fighter pilot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say by like 14, I want to be a fighter pilot. By 16, I'm like, I'm going to fly F-18s for the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Period. Dot. End of story.
Yeah.
And never deviated from that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Were sports a big part of your childhood?
Yes and no. Like, I played sports. I was basically average at all. I was never good at anything.
Unremarkable,
dude. Like, played Little League growing up. I have probably my favorite story about what kind of caliber of athlete I was. I tried out for my high school baseball team as a freshman, and the coach, I remember telling me, he's like, "You got a great attitude. We love your work ethic. You will make the team, but you'll never play." So like, I had a good attitude, a good mentality. I tried really hard, but I just wasn't a great athlete. Yeah. So I hate to say, like, I like sports, but not really. I just wasn't good at anything, enough to be remarkable.
I imagine doing as well as you did in the Marine Corps flight path. Were you a good student, I imagine?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So in high school, like, I did figure out that I was smart enough to do fine with little effort. And I think that the thing for me that I had to outgrow was I could show up in high school and probably like the first couple of days tell my mom okay, I'm going to get an A in this class, I'm going to get B's in this class, and know ahead of time like how much effort was going to put into it. No real work was ever done to do well in high school because I didn't have any dreams of going to a particular college. I just needed to go to the nearest school, and I did fine. I did decent, but I didn't put in a ton of effort into it. But I knew I was on things that I liked, I was willing to work really hard at. That paid dividends in the military because all the stuff I was doing I liked. So I could work hard at something and do well. High school and probably half of college, I was just, what's the minimum effort to get the B and move on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's value in efficiency that way.
Indeed,
I mean, there's one way to look at it.
I was very efficient. That's a great word for it. That's the word I'm going to use. I was very efficient in high school.
Fast forwarding to what you've been doing professionally now since retiring, is there a single life lesson or principle that you draw from your childhood that you teach as somebody who kind of leads the charge in such a leadership heavy role?
Yeah, I am probably a really good example of I think there's some cliches that I can get it right, like luck and opportunity or timing and opportunity. I'm a really good example of you got to work really hard to prepare yourself. So if the opportunity does reveal itself, you can take advantage of it. All of one or all the other doesn't happen. You're never just going to get fully lucky and things just fall into your lap, and you could work your butt off and things don't happen the way that you want because timing or circumstance or external forces. But throughout life, you're going to have these inflection points, these intersections. And I am a really good example of the concept of work really hard to be prepared. And if you see an opportunity, you gotta go all in on that opportunity and seize it because you're only going to get a couple.
Yeah. The luck favors the prepared type.
Perfect.
Of talent. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Why was the choice for the Marines over all other branches? Because growing up in El Toro and seeing the Marine Corps base.
100%. And I talk about this a little. Junior year in high school, I applied for Air Force ROTC. I was really interested in flying. The Navy. I saw Topgun. F-14 and really cool jets. The Air Force, of course, is awesome. And I even went so far down the path of getting pretty serious about doing an Air Force ROTC program, wanting to fly for the Air Force, and right up to the point where I was going to make a commitment late in my senior year in high school, I was essentially signing on the dotted line to go to school, do an Air Force ROTC program, and have a pathway to flying for the Air Force. And I just had this moment of, I think it's probably more acceptance that I always knew is I wanted to be a Marine. Yeah. Like being around the Marines, and this is not a criticism of the other service. I've served along with the Navy, a lot of time with the Air Force. They're all awesome. But there was something about the Marine Corps that I could not get out of my system, where I had to accept late in my senior year, like, I don't want to be in the Air Force. I want to be a Marine. And I just, thank God, that inner voice of like, dude, you want to be that. And that was all just growing up around Marines and just putting them up on a pedestal. Yeah. Just couldn't help it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty common. I mean, I kind of similarly, I almost joined the Marine Corps and fairly last minute kind of was like, no, I'm going to do the Navy instead. But so I certainly get that there's just something about the Marine Corps that separates itself from everything else in a really positive manner. So did you end up doing that same path, but just in the Marines, the ROTC thing, or where?
No, I didn't. So by the time I had cracked the code, I always knew it. I think it was as a voice in the back of my mind where I finally just had to listen to it. Like, hey, dude, this is what you want. I ended up. So Marine Corps has a couple of different ways to become an officer. Things like the academy, not an option for me. Not a consideration or an option. I was way too efficient in high school to be considered for the academy. ROTC was something that I probably could have looked into it, but I never really did, because when I accepted, hey, I want to be in Marines. I want to be in the Marines. I was 17. I'm getting ready to start college. I'd gotten into a local state school just down the road from where I lived. And I went to it's called an OSO, a recruiter for officers. And they're like, hey, we got this program. It's called PLC. It's the most common way for a Marine. You don't need to do anything other than, go through officer candidate school and get your degree. You got to go to OCS in the summers. And he laid it out, and he recruits the wrong word, but he essentially contracted me as a ground officer and explained that I would get an opportunity to earn a flight slot down the road. And at 17, got my mom to sign off on all the paperwork, got this whole thing locked and loaded, and very different approach the Marine Corps has than the other services. And I took their most common path, which was that.
Yeah. And so where did you go to school?
Cal State Fullerton. So
okay.
I'm up in Orange County in El Toro. Went to El Toro High School. Fullerton is, 30 minutes up the road from where I grew up.
Yeah. What did you study?
Political science.
Yeah. And then the path from that right into the Marine Corps. And was there anything remarkable in that phase of the kind of early years of your Marine?
Yeah, there was some definite growing up for me. So I was always a late bloomer, just late on all sorts of things, late growing up, late getting bigger and taller and things like that. I was always a small kid. I have very vivid memories. I always wanted to be a Marine. Always, this whole thing in my head was very crystal clear, right? Applied for the program, do the physical fitness test, get contracted, get accepted. And then the first summer after your freshman year of college, so I'm 18 and I go to officer candidate school. And I show up like day one of OCS, get off the bus, and you're in essentially this Quonset hut with, your platoon's like 75 guys, I think, in the platoon. And I'm looking around, dude, and I'm absolutely, there is no way I'm going to get through this program. I knew the second I got there, I bit off way more than I could chew. I'm in way over my head. I do not belong here. I am the scrawniest. I'm the skinniest. I mean, there are grown men, grown college athletes, former enlisted guys, and I had almost in the first day told myself, you can't do this. And there's a couple of days, paperwork in processing it, and I don't know what happened, but within a couple of days, you go out on your very first run. Platoon commander takes you out on a run at OCS, and he's running faster than I've ever in my, I cannot do this. And I'm having this moment where in my head, I'm like, I can't do this. I way in over my head. And it's about the time I'm thinking about just quitting. Some guy in my platoon, who I don't know who it is, who's only been there a couple of days, who's twice as big, twice as strong as me, falls out of the run. And I can see it, he kind of just falls out of the squad and kind of peels off to the side. And 2 or 3 of the Marine instructors just annihilate this guy, and it scared the hell out of me. And I'm okay, I'll go back to running. And that happened several times in the program in that program that I was in, that right about the time I'm like, I can't do this. I'm in over my head. Somebody would quit. And several weeks into it, something triggered holy shit, dude, you can do this. And so I think I grew up as an adult at OCS, and this idea that I always wanted to do this, and then got there and realized that this is not for you, or not good enough. You cannot be here. And seeing people that I looked at were bigger and stronger and more qualified than me couldn't do it, somehow flipped a switch in me that set me on a path these lofty goals, okay, I think I might be able to do this. I went there with no confidence, did not have the right mentality. And I don't know exactly how it worked out, but I think seeing other people that I didn't think were going to quit, fueled something in me, and something woke up that I did not know that I had. And I think it's that intangible component of passion that can drive you to do things that you physically otherwise couldn't do.
Yeah.
I was on the ragged edge of quitting and failing several times, and circumstance had it where I saw other people, that set me on the path.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I went through almost the exact same experience going through BUDS, because I was in BUDS at 18. And yeah, same thing. My first military ID, I weighed 147 pounds. I was the same height, 5'11", and showing up, and I'm looking around, I'm just like, dude, there's D1 athletes.
Totally.
And, 26-year-old dudes.
Totally.
And I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Exactly.
And I will say, I never really seriously considered quitting. There's always the thought of, it would sure be a lot easier to just not do this anymore.
Yeah.
But I was never like, man, should I quit? Maybe I shouldn't be here. But I absolutely had just zero confidence in my ability to make it. It was more like, well, this is why I'm here, and I'll give it the college try, and then same thing. It was like I started seeing guys falling out. I'm like, shit, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Like, maybe there's something to this. And very similarly, I mean, and the thing with buds is that, there's the obvious Hell Week catalyst or crest of the wave that, like, once you're on the backside of that, I'm not going to say it's smooth sailing, but putting that brown T-shirt on after that and seeing how many guys quit, in that 6-day period, it was just like I was a completely different person 6 days later, for all of those same reasons, like just totally different level of confidence and almost like a stoic-like air of confidence in a way that I'd never experienced, because I was always the smaller, younger, scrawnier, friend zoned by the hot chicks, like, average sports, like just, I was just never that guy, and like, all
I know
of a
the
sudden
feeling,
it's like,
man.
This is pretty awesome.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So if you could kind of walk us through the procession of your career.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously flying a 16, 18, 22, and 35, like, I am curious, like, is there one that stands out as being your favorite?
No, that's an impossible question to answer. It really is. The fact that even happened is just crazy.
Yeah.
And
That's not common.
I can't say with 100% certainty, but with about 99% certainty, I think I'm the only one.
Wow.
If there's another one, it's happened very recently, and if it did, awesome. But certainly for the longest time. And if you just look back on like how a traditional career goes compared to how my career goes, just crazy.
Yeah.
Just and again, so much of those things beyond. I didn't schedule these exchanges. I didn't schedule the arrival of these jets. I can't take credit for a lot of those things that happen from the parts beyond your control. But I really wanted to fly F-18s. So that base that I grew up at, I grew up starting to see F-4 Phantoms, and the Marine Corps Phantom is this iconic, just this kick-ass Vietnam era airplane. Within a couple of years of me moving out there, the Hornet shows up, and the F-18 kind of represented this new high-tech Star Wars-y thing. The Blue Angels started flying them, and that's something that I just like, I want to fly that airplane. And I knew what squadron, I knew what model, I knew to the T. So the Hornet piece for me was the one that was very naturally fit what I wanted to do in my career. And that worked out. And there's a million wickets between getting selected for Marine Corps officer candidate school and the cockpit of an F-18. But they're kind of straightforward. Like they're straightforward. You got to do these things. You got to do well. You got to finish at these places. You got to get selected. When I got through that path of getting F-18s for the Marine Corps, there was definitely this thing in the back of my mind from childhood is I wanted to go to Top Gun.
Yeah.
And that's the movie, that's this pop culture, that's all the things that every pilot, and you could have any pilot in the world sit in this seat, and I'm telling you, they watched Top Gun and they had the same reaction that I did. It was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I always had that in the back of my mind, and I was very lucky to get selected to go to Top Gun as a student, and then very, very, even more lucky to get selected to come back to instruct after I was a student there. What was random was when I showed back up to Top Gun to be an instructor, literally like the month I show up, the Navy had received their first batch of F-16s that we bought in well over a decade. And so I show up to Top Gun, and the first thing Top Gun does is send me to the Air Force, technically the Air National Guard, to learn to fly the F-16. Wow. So all of a sudden I'm like, a plane that there was no chance I'd ever see the cockpit of that airplane. The same day I show up, this thing shows up at Top Gun, and I'm the first class of Marines that trained in it. It's like, come on, dude. Like, you can't take credit for that stuff, right? You cannot say, I did that. Those are just things that just happen. So a bunch of things I did to get to that spot that just landed in my lap, man. Yeah. Just unreal.
God, it's crazy. How much or I guess I would say, is there any part of the movie that reflects the actual experience accurately? Folks, just a quick heads up. I do have a Team Dog Patreon tier where I answer questions via video, either just describing the answer to the question or even demonstrating some of it. So go to our Mic Drop Patreon page, check out the Team Dog tier, and I look forward to seeing you in there. Thank you much.
I love both the movies. They're very different. I think the second movie did a better job in 2 hours capturing what's really going on there. There's things the first movie didn't do right by what the course is really like, but they captured the sentiment of things. I think one thing the movies both capture really well is there's this huge drive, huge amount of competitive drive. Now, it's nowhere near the level of rivalry that is depicted in the movie. These people don't like each other. It's not like that. But there is an absolute drive, and I think it's more authentic in the real world that the drive, let's say you and I were both students there, we're pushing each other to get better, but we're pushing each other like hard. Like, there is real competition, never at the other person's expense. So never I win, you lose, which is a little how the movie portrays it, these two characters. But they capture this idea of this massively ego-driven desire to be really good. It doesn't look like that in the real world, but the sentiment of that I thought they captured extremely well. Yeah. And there was just, you want to do well.
Yeah. Is the, I guess the outside of the course, is there that kind of camaraderie and hanging out and that whole kind of component?
These are your bros, you bond. Yeah. Certainly the guys in your class, I can there's a connection, and as an instructor too, like your staff members, the bros, it is a real thing, is this tight connection. And what's interesting too about Topgun, when I was there, Topgun is up at Fallon, Nevada, and I know you've been up there to train up there. It's the middle of nowhere. Yeah. So there's nothing else to do and nobody else to do it with except your boys.
The old pigs in space.
I've been there many times. And so like super close with the staff, super close with the spouses. Like, it's a really, really tight knit group. Yeah. There's nothing else to do.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the last question about the competitive nature, and that it was more in spirit, or like almost more gentlemanly about it. It's funny about the SEAL teams is it's just like the movie, where it's absolutely at the expense of your bros to the point where, like, run, swim, runs. It's like, if I'm ahead of, a guy in my platoon and he sees me, 30 feet out into the water already swimming, my running shoes are here, my fins are on, I'm swimming, he'll tie my fucking shoes together and like double knot them and throw them in the bush, so that when I get out, it takes me 6 minutes to unfuck myself. And so now he's caught up. Like, it's stuff like that all the time. Yeah. I mean, never anything operationally, like, you're not putting blanks in somebody's mag or something like that. But yeah, I mean, like that whole, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, like, just gets beat into you all the time. But,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. What is the selection process for, like, how many billets there are, and how they actually hand them to different units, and how they pick? And
a little random, and I might be a little dated. Things have changed a little bit. I went to Topgun in 2001, so for those listening, I'm sure there's a little evolution there. Nothing is set in stone. It doesn't say exactly how it is, but and a little bit different from Marines too. So this is a Navy school. This is the Navy's fighter weapons school. But because the Navy and Marines work so closely together, and certainly at the time, and it's also true now, you've got a couple of Marine squadrons part of Navy Carrier Air Wing. So there's this TAC-air integration between the Navy and Marine Corps who work really well together. Which means the Marine Corps, even though they have their own schools, their own weapon schools and stuff like that, there's a link to the Navy. So this is how the Marine Corps operates, generically speaking. Every squadron in the Marine Corps, fighter squadron, gets roughly one person to send. Now, it's not a rule. It's not hard and fast. And if you deployed 1 year, maybe you get none, and you get 2 the year you're on workups, and it might not work out exactly 1 every year, but on the whole, you send 1 guy a year, roughly. The criteria for that, straight up, the commanding officer makes that decision. And there's probably all sorts of things. Your reputation, how you do, different things that went into that. The Marine Corps has a program, and again, it's evolved a little bit. It's called ACTI, which basically you're training a guy to be a teacher. And it's this huge workup, this huge graded event. You bring these outside instructors to evaluate you, and your performance on that really weighs very heavily. Your reputation in the airplane, just overall generic opinion. And at the end of the day, the CO picks, again, roughly 1 guy a year to go to the class to represent that squadron. Because the Marine Corps sends a guy to Topgun, and when he comes back, he's kind of one of, if not the tactical leader, has a big influence in the squadron, typically becomes what's called the training officer, really massively influential guy. So who goes is a big deal to the squadron, and the CO is really the deciding factor on that. You got to have the right timing, and all the other things got to fall into place. But you are essentially hoping you get picked.
Yeah. What's interesting, I assume then that in many cases you have a guy as the CO who is picking people to go to a course he's never been to.
100%, absolutely.
Like most of the time,
My
probably.
my CO did not go to Top Gun.
That would, I wonder, is there like almost not a professional jealousy, but maybe in a way, like I have to send people to some shit that I never got a chance to go to. Like there would almost be a weirdness in that. I think.
Yeah, there might be. I haven't thought of that. My boss put a ton of faith in me. He was one of those bosses that really believed in investing in young. He sent guys to every school he possibly could. He had a really good attitude of doing that. So I was the beneficiary. I was also the youngest, of the qualified, the range of guys that in theory could have been picked as probably 7 or 8 guys on paper. I was essentially the most junior of those guys. And he was open-minded enough to consider the most junior guy in that window, which worked out to my favor because he was willing to send guys to schools.
Yeah. Is there any kind of professional jealousy with the guys that don't get picked, like they're giving you shit because you get to go and they don't?
100%. 100%. Some of it's unspoken.
Yeah.
Some of it is just straight up in your face.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's easy for me to say because it happened the way that I wanted to. But dude, everybody wants to go to Top Gun, man.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
Yeah. Is the assumption that, of all the schools and training pipelines or programs that a military or a Navy and Marine Corps fighter pilot can attend, that it's overwhelmingly bang for your buck where you learn the most?
Top Gun's the best school in naval aviation, period. It just is. And there are Marines listening to me right now because they're Marine rep and school instructors, and those programs are awesome. And I'm not disparaging any of that. Top Gun for naval aviation, Navy and Marine Corps fighter aviation, just represents the apex. It has been around the longest. It shares the best reputation. It is a worldwide known organization. And, I think of it too, the Navy has done a really good job of this. Like, it's kind of like SEALs are ubiquitous of special forces. Like, it's just, the SEALs have just carry this reputation and this weight. Top Gun for us is very similar to that. It just represents the apex of that community, and it shares that and enjoys that reputation.
Is there a single element of it that warrants that reputation?
There's not one thing. There's a blend of a lot of things, and I think it's the ability to incorporate all the different components that make the school exceptional and maintain that standard for coming up on 60 years now. To be able to do that is not easy to do. There is no one singular thing, but there's a series of things that it has to continue to do and has done really, really well to maintain the mantle that it's been sitting on for a long time.
Yeah. Is it common for people to get dropped from the course during?
Not common, not unheard of. The screening process is pretty good. So bear in mind, before you go to Top Gun as a student, you've completed all these certifications, all these internal squadron evaluations. You are being judged by other Top Gun graduates who don't want to send you if they don't think you're going to be successful. So most of the people that get there are going to be okay. When I was the lead instructor, I sent 2 instructors. I shouldn't say that they were going to be. I sent 2 students home from Top Gun.
For what reason?
It's a little bit of a blend. What I typically like to say is most of the time, what gets in the way is your ego. And it's the ego of, I go, hey, Mike, good flight, but here's some things I need you to work on. And you're like, meh, I don't think so. And I'm paraphrasing. Obviously, it could be way more complicated than that. But your lack of willingness to learn and get better. There are also, every now and then, the course has a way of escalating to a place where sometimes it's too fast, it's too complex, there's too much going on, the demand is too high, and the requirements for you not just to fly there, not just to do well, but to be able to explain what happened and teach it, teaching is hard. There are times that some people just can't do it.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, in my time where I accounted for 3 people that got sent home during the course when I was the training officer, it was a little bit of blend of not being able to accept the feedback to change the things you needed to do to accomplish those things.
What was it? And I'm not asking you to trash students, but is part of it, or was part of it, the pushback, like overt attitude with you? Like, would that be a factor if somebody is kind of giving you attitude about it? Like,
yeah, it's not that common at Top Gun, although it's not unheard of.
Yeah.
In fact, where I saw that more, that resistance, was young pilots that just checked into the staff at Top Gun. The students, for the most part, and this is, again, this is not how the movie depicts, like, you know, Mavericks as good as these, like, when the students show up to Top Gun, man, they aren't even in the same league as the instructors. There's no competition. There's no them doing as well as us. And that's not a judgment. They're just, it's just reps. It's just, these are white, you know, white belts, or I would say, you know, like purple belts to black belts. It's not that they're bad. They're just nowhere near as capable. Right. So most of the time, the students are pretty humble. Even the ones that are struggling, they're humble. A brand new instructor, and we've all gone through this. I know what this feels like. When you get selected to be an instructor, there's a little thing in your ego that's like, dude, you are now at the top of the top of the top of that pyramid. Pretty much every wicket has been met, and your ego likes that. Yeah. Your ego's like, oh, I am the guy. I'm the guy. I'm the man. That movie, that's about me. And so sometimes the feedback you give early instructors in the first year on the staff is tough, man. You are getting crushed to try to get to the level of qualification you need to be to start teaching. You don't teach at Top Gun in your first year there in the jet. You're not even close. That's where the ego came out as a resistance to feedback, because you're like, dude, I earned my spot here. I'm an instructor on the staff. I'm on this team. That's where I saw more of the ego resistance than from the students going through.
Yeah. Is there a Top Gun honor man kind of thing, the way that they depict in the movie?
Not on paper. Yeah. They do not give an honor graduate at Top Gun.
However,
and again, this is for Marines, a little bit different. The Marine Corps will bring, on average, there's 3 Marine pilots on the staff, and it rotates. So once a year, on average, they will take a student and invite him back. Well, that student didn't get an honor graduate certificate or recognition,
but basically
that's their way of saying, hey, you were a standout. We briefed the staff. The staff is in agreement. We want to bring you back as an instructor.
Yeah. And what is the breakdown of Navy pilot spots to Marine Corps, and about how many students go through in a year?
Oh, man. So we do 4 courses a year. It's roughly 12 weeks. So most of the year you're putting a course through, and you'll have somewhere between like 8 and 12 crews. So call it 20 people. And that might be a little bit heavy, maybe 15 or something. You know, the bros are probably annoyed with me because I'm getting these numbers slightly off, but somewhere around there. And it's probably about 80-20 Navy Marines. So about 20% is Marines.
Yeah.
Roughly. Yeah. I'm going to get yelled at.
Exact figure. Man, it's cool to be able to, you know, just hearing about your experiences there. Again, seeing the movie as a kid and seeing the second one, which I thought, I was shocked at how good of a job they did on the second one. Like, I think they blew it out of the water.
Loved it.
So, all right, so you did F-18s and then kind of lucked into the F-16 slot. Did you come right back or relatively soon after as an instructor? Like, was it student to instructor, or did you go back and...
Yeah, so I am the last graduating class at Top Gun before 9/11.
Oh, wow.
So summer of 2001, June-ish 2001, I go to Top Gun as a student. I'd been selected earlier that year. My course comes up in the middle of summer of 2001. I graduate either late July, early August, somewhere around there. Back to my squadron, call it August of 2001. 6 weeks later, 9/11. 6 weeks after that, my ship accelerates the carrier deployment by several months. We go off to Afghanistan, and we're starting at the time. This is, fall of 2001, global war and terror kicks off. I'm on the John C. Senates. We're dropping bombs in Afghanistan. On that deployment, I get a call from the commander of Top Gun. Hey, we'd like you. The senior Marine invites me to come back to the staff after my deployment. So deployment ends in May. The following summer, and I think it's August, so it's probably just about 1 year to the day that I left the course, I'm back as an instructor. And in between that, I had a combat deployment to Afghanistan off carriers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I assume that, or I imagine that that's a fairly quick turnaround typically, or is that normal?
It varies. That's about Marines. They want to send the Marines after they go through the course. They want to send them back to the squadron to take all that knowledge and share it. And hey, you learned all this stuff. Teach the command. Yeah. The combat deployment obviously changes that whole timeline up a little bit. And what's interesting for me is, I went to Top Gun in a peacetime military. Desert Storm was 91. We hadn't done anything in 10 years. I come back as an instructor in a wartime military. So big change, and a lot of things in terms of how we manage that evolved because we're in a war.
Yeah. Did the lessons learned from your combat deployment shift the instruction and tactics drastically?
There was probably the most significant change was the recognition that we needed to make the training harder, longer, more difficult, more demanding, higher bar. And it's not that that was a low bar, and I don't think I would even describe some degree of complacency inside the course. The program was awesome. The instructors were awesome. The demand signal changed overnight. And our understanding of that demand signal was, if we want them to be prepared for war, you got to make the training harder. And so that was, to me, noticeable that we made the course much longer and much higher bar set very quickly after I came back.
What is a typical day and week there?
Oh, dude. Typical day, if you're flying, is you probably fly like roughly, again, ballpark, every other day. A day of prep, a day to fly. Day to prep, day to fly. That's varies. Sometimes you're flying 5 days in a row. Sometimes you'll have 2 days in between flights. And so it varies on the flow of the program. But a day is you roll in at 5 something. You spend a couple hours prepping. You put up your board. You rehearse. You bring the team in. You spend a solid hour or so briefing. You go execute on the flight, which takes 45 to an hour. You come back and you debrief for 5 or 6 hours. Wow. And so, if you're on the 6:45 brief, you're there at 5 in the morning and you're leaving at 5 at night. And then it's right back into the next day.
Yeah. That amount of debrief, there's part of me that kind of internally asks, like, how is there that much to talk about?
It's a good question. It's the right question to ask. Topgun is a schoolhouse. And so we have the luxury of, there's no ground job. There's no other responsibility. There's nothing else going on. It's not real, because in the real Marine Corps and the real Navy, I was a fighter pilot, but I was the power line OIC. I was a quality assurance officer. I had jobs, real Marines. So Top Gun has the luxury of doing that. And one of the things we have to teach is Mike comes through to the course and you'll debrief for 5 hours. I said, when you go back to your squadron, do not do that. That's not real.
Yeah.
But the point behind that is, one is, you asked a really good question. There is that much to debrief. Yeah. If you're going to be that precise. And if you're willing to look at everything, you're going to find a lot. And so part of it is going, hey, dude, we have nothing else to do here. So don't skip over anything. There's no point.
Beach volleyball.
Yeah. That's not.
Did that ever happen?
That's not even close. This is not even like.
Is there anything like that?
No.
Nothing.
Nothing like
bowling, nothing.
We do a softball game where the students get annihilated by the instructors one day. But no, there's no none of that stuff.
No crotch rockets paralleling the flight line, nothing.
Negative. Looks good on film, not real life. But in those debriefs, man, because there's nothing else to do, part of it is, one of the tests for you as a student is, I as the instructor, when I'm there, when we go through a flight together, I'm going to write down everything that I think we can talk about and discuss. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not hammering you for screwing things up. It's just all the little mistakes we made. And the real test of a student is, and this is the difference between a beginning student and a student at the end, is when you're done debriefing, I'll have crossed 3 things off my list. I'm like, oh, cool, we're done? Good job. Okay, now I got a couple things for you. And I'll have 37 other things to say. And by the end, my list, in an ideal world, I've crossed it off and I'm like, bro, you hit them all. Yeah. That doesn't mean you're perfect in the jet, and there's nowhere near perfect execution, but it's your ability to recognize all the things we did. Now, your job when you go back to the fleet, because we don't have 5 hours, is for this student, this other flight squadron member, is you're not going to cover 37 things. You're going to pick 2. But you're going to know which 2 to pick for that person at that time to go, all right, here, I want to focus on these 2 things. And you and I will spend 30 minutes on these 2 things. And I might not even get to the other ones. And that's okay, because you have a real job and real life is going on. But I have the ability to identify all those things and be precise in my instruction to make sure you get better in the limited time we have. At Top Gun, you got nothing but time. So we'll debrief for 6-7 hours sometimes. Sometimes there's 4 or 6 guys in a flight, and we'll go through every single communication, every single execution. And it takes time.
Yeah. So, it's teaching you to do what you were already good at, as being efficient.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's perfect, man. That is perfect.
Is there, or are there a few things that are the most commonly screwed up or most common debrief points?
Yeah. there's a blend of two things. One is execution in the jet. I think one of the things that Top Gun teaches that is really hard to understand is when you get there, there have to be parallels to what you know from the teams. Is when you get to Top Gun, you think you know how to fly your airplane really well. You've got all the training, all the evaluations, and you've got the head nod, you got the selection. You're going to Top Gun. So you're like, oh, I must be pretty good in the airplane. And you get there, and right away what you realize is you are nowhere near maximizing the ability of this machine. You cannot optimize this machine the way you think. And so the first part is the air of not, we use the term max performing. So at every phase of a flight, every parameter, there's an optimal way to do it, whether it's speed, whether it's angle of attack, there's a bunch of different ways to measure it. A student will come back and you'll show him like, hey, you should be at 35 degrees AOA right here, and you're at 33. And he's like, gosh, damn, man, that's like 2 degrees. Like, yeah, that is 2 degrees. And 2 degrees over time is the difference between winning and losing. So the first most common error is nobody knows that they don't know how to max perform their airplane. So one of them is learning the regimes, all the corners of the envelope of a jet, and flying optimally there. The second is, and I'll call it just generically, it's really a blend of like situational awareness and recall, is you have to know not just what's going on in your jet, but as a flight lead for this mission, you have to understand what's going on in all these other airplanes, to include the adversaries, the bad guys we're fighting against. And you probably, and forgive me, and I don't want to do a bad job talking about we can talk about my time with Jocko and the SEALs, but maybe the first time doing CQC, clearing a house. And like, oh, I know what to do, and then you do it and you're like, that sucked. And then by the end, you can anticipate even what the threat might be thinking and how much of a growth there is from you in your cockpit or you with your weapon to, by the end, you're max performing, but you also are thinking about what all the other people are doing, and you're able to give feedback and debrief to the other guys on your team and understand what the enemy is doing in real time while max performing your airplane or while max performing yourself. Really, really hard. Yeah. Really hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's fascinating hearing you walk through that. It reminds me, the parallel SEAL community-wise, I think, is probably more dev group versus regular teams, because I think most guys showing up to a SEAL team know that they don't know anything. Like, one, it's been beaten into you all of buds. Like, when you show up, you better have no attitude, and it's like, you don't know shit, and it's going to take you 10 years before you even think you know what you're doing. Whereas there's some guys who are pretty on top of their game or that think they are until they go through green team and realize there's a whole different level. And I'm not speaking from experience, but I know enough guys who, when they went there, they're like, I thought I was good at CQC until I went there, and same, it sounds like it's kind of a similar thing there. But I am curious, with that being kind of what sounds like the essence of Top Gun is teaching people how to maximize the capability and threshold of the airframe. With AI being such a now powerful integration into that, I mean, I've had other guys, other pilots, fighter pilots on the show, and we've talked a little bit about it, but someone with your depth of experience, I'm really curious. I think it's inevitable there's going to come a time where the human pilot doesn't need to exist and maybe won't.
Yeah.
Or it'll be almost like a C-130 style, not necessarily flying that, but you're hanging back, kind of keeping an eye on all of the AI pilots or, something like that. Where are we in that timeline, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll give you like a very short and then maybe a slightly longer answer, because I think philosophically it's the question to be asking. The short answer is we're at the beginning of what I think is a very steep curve. And so I don't think if I come back in 10 years, we're like, well, we're really this whole AI thing is starting to emerge, and we're not going to have that conversation. I think it's going to be a steep curve, which I think why the longer version of the answer is, and I don't actually know if my opinion is shared by my community. I've never really floated my thoughts on this, and I got to be careful too. Like, my opinion is meaningless. It's just what I think, and it's not steeped in anything other than just what I think I know. Is when I think about like the concept of the single seat fighter pilot, like kind of the manifestation, the P-51, the Corsair, the F-18, F-16, and the impact the individual has on the aircraft and the aircraft has on the world in terms of this being a weapon system, I think we're on the clock for the ability for that individual pilot and his aircraft to be the primary contributor to what that weapon system can do for the battle space. And I'm not saying like there will be, you alluded to, like, hey, maybe you'll be kind of a battle manager or there might be roles and places for you there. I think the advent of AI in the traditional fighter pilot world is going to be dramatic. And I think I would not be surprised if in my lifetime there's a generation of fighter aircraft being built that are unmanned. And I'm not talking about drone. I'm talking about AI-centric platforms. And if I think about like 30 years from now, what will technology look like in 30 years from now? What I know is that I don't know, and I know it's going to be infinitely more than I can imagine. So that tells me, and it may be a slightly unpopular point of view, is that the single-seat fighter pilot cliche is on the clock.
Yeah. I don't disagree. And if your opinion means nothing, then I don't know how to even describe what my opinion doesn't mean. But I can 100% see that, and it is a little terrifying. I think part of it is just understanding that the possibilities are so beyond our grasp that in itself is kind of frightening. You know, we've all seen Terminator 2, and I do think that the humanoid robot on the ground like a human doesn't make sense. Like, I get it in the movie, but now, like, as we're on the cusp of this actually happening, it's like the drones and the fighter the winged and rotary, fixed and rotary winged AI controlled platforms are 1,000x more likely, I think, and bang for your buck just make way more sense than having human-like skeletoid robots walking around shooting at things.
Totally agree with that. Yep.
But it is, to me, the biggest concern I have is, I think the same one that anybody would have, is that it's the what ifs. It's the self-aware, not in the sense that I think most people throw that term out there. I don't think there's any capability of being completely sentient and self-aware, but learns enough like a human to act like one.
Yeah. I
think that's the more likely thing. But with humans, there come a lot of flaws, emotions, things that, if it's all zeros and ones, those are impossible to interpret, but they're not impossible to mimic. And I think that's the most terrifying thing, is that humans fuck up. We have emotionally based decisions that if a machine who doesn't have those learns them, will still mimic them, even if they don't feel them.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like this. It's like the hand over the baseball, bat thing, where it's like, I can imagine a point where, it starts to mimic things in a way where it doesn't matter, whether or not they realize what they're doing, and turning on human beings, or even just screwing up, no matter how good any computer-based system, or whether it's ChatGPT or any AI platform that you utilize, you see the quirks, you see the mistakes, and I don't think, because they're programmed by humans make mistakes, they're always going to be there.
Yep.
But the better it gets, the more magnified they are.
Yeah, and I mean, we could talk about this for days. I mean, this is a real conversation, and
all right, folks, some breaking news right off the top. Beam's cyber sale is now open for early access for my listeners, and it's their best offer of the year. Right now, my listeners get up to 50% off with my code MikeDrop, all caps, all one word. And you can grab Dream for just $32.50. That breaks down to only $1.08 per night. For the best sleep of your life, go to shopbeam.com/MikeDrop and use my code MikeDrop. And don't miss out. This is the lowest price Dream has ever been sold anywhere, and they will likely sell out quickly. Now, if you've listened to this show for a while, you've heard me talk about Beam. They're an American company founded by people who actually believe in hard work, clean products, and personal responsibility. And unlike the junk pushed by Big Pharma, Beam's Dream Powder is clean. There's no fillers, absolutely no synthetic garbage. Dream is packed with ingredients your body actually needs to sleep. It comes packed with reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and yes, even melatonin. But dosed intelligently, not like the drugstore garbage that knocks you out and leaves you groggy. So now's the time. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount. Go to shopbeam.com/micdrop and use the code MicDrop, all caps, all one word, and get up to 50% off during Beam's cyber sale. You can grab Dream for just $32.50. But here's the catch. Dream is only available at this price until it sells out. So seriously, think about it. How much would you pay for a truly great night of sleep? With Beam's cyber price, it's just $1.08 per night. Go to shopbeam.com/micdrop and try Beam today.
The component, I think, is a driver for me of thinking about what does the generational change look like after this next round of fighters that we're going to build. Is there's also, I think, a very heavy component that weighs on the risk associated with the individual pilot in the cockpit being the centerpiece of the decision making in what is very likely going to be a higher and higher threat environment. And so if you're going to continue to see mistakes like you described, like, hey, this isn't about creating an error-free autonomous brain that does not make those mistakes. It's the risk of that associated with it. Is it worth the risk of the human individual that would be part of that? Or is there a better, smarter, safer place for that person to be where when the mistake does occur, we're not losing plane and pilot like we used to anymore? And I think that even tends to complicate even our vision of what does an AI-driven platform do. And I think some of it is it'll fix all these things. I don't think it's going to fix all these things. It might fix some of them. It's going to reveal others. But now you have this question of, do we want to be sending this individual and the risk associated with that when you can replicate the capability with, I would say, like no real degradation, except there's no risk to the individual. And that's why I think in this very narrow single seat fighter world, I don't think the same challenge persists for commercial airlines.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time imagining you and I walking onto an airplane, looking to the left and seeing like no cockpit or a robot. People don't like that idea.
Yeah.
And I could see us people flying airplanes for our entire lifetime. That's a very different scenario than, again, and I'm using this somewhat cliched scenario of this single seat fighter pilot genre that I think understandably would age out based on that technology, but not because it fixes all the problems. It's because the risk to the individual gets removed in doing it. And that's appealing to us.
For sure.
So it's a really interesting discussion, and there's a lot of unknowns that are out there.
Yeah.
I personally think that the single seat fighter pilot is on the clock.
Yeah. Well, and I know, again, we could talk about this for 5 hours probably, but I do wonder, as somebody who spent so much time in them, and I know this is maybe more of the engineers at Shield AI or Mach Industries or the places that are developing these types of things. But does the fighter jet as an entity, as a generic entity, even really need to exist once humans aren't piloting them? Because to me, like if you're looking at quad rotor monster drones or predators, whatever, like does that platform is it even really relevant anymore?
Yeah. And I think that's where the creativity and open-mindedness of trying to understand what the future of warfare looks like, it requires the willingness to imagine things that you can't imagine. And I understand even the conflict in how I chose to say that. I understand what I'm saying doesn't come naturally. But I think that open-mindedness is a hard thing for us to grasp, especially when you come from having been central to being part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it forces you to abandon everything you know.
Yes, which is violation of human nature. It's tough. Yeah.
All right, so F-18s, F-16s, Topgun.
Yeah.
Where does the F-22 and F-35 come in? And actually, I guess before you get into that, the combat deployment, the first one that you did you do multiple combat deployments?
Yeah, so my first deployment in 2000 was a mission we called Operation Southern Watch, which was defending the Iraq no-fly zone.
Yeah.
Which at the time was like, that was war, and I remember, I tell a story like I dropped a JDAM, a GPS guided bomb, which when I did that in 2000 was like the first one we'd ever done, is the most high tech thing. I had a GPS weapon that went to the target. It was crazy. Yeah. Then I go to Afghanistan, fly much more robust combat missions off carriers there. Then I go to Topgun and then I did my year as a forward air controller.
Oh, wow.
And got to see war from a very different perspective.
I didn't realize you did that.
Yeah, so that's
Wow.
ironically inside of my 23-year career and all those different fighters, by far the most impactful year of my life was when I was a FAC. And just for the audience and just for you, like that's where I met Leif and Jocko.
Yeah.
That's my connection to them. Is I left Top Gun, I had this nagging sense of wanted to be a Marine, grew up wanted to be a Marine, and what I'd done is naval flight training. As a Marine, flew off carriers and then went to Top Gun. And I loved the Navy, but it was a very Navy-centric experience. Flying Navy training, Navy carriers, Navy Top Gun. I get the Air Force jet, which is like the coolest thing ever. And I'm really close to getting out. I'm like 99% sure I'm going to get out. And I'm like, well, I don't want to leave the Marine Corps without doing something very uniquely Marine. And there's one thing the Marine Corps does that the other services don't do, you might know this, is they send their pilots to be forward air controllers. And I volunteered to be a forward air controller. And I don't need to bore you with all the details, but in a series of moves, I ended up in Ramadi in 2006, showed up in Ramadi as an Anglico forward air controller, same place, same time. Jocko's task unit, Bruiser, shows up, and I end up working.
Wow.
So essentially every major operation that Jocko and Leif did, I was with them as the forward air controller.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It was a wild deployment, man.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Team 3 right before that. I left right before that.
Yeah.
But those, several deployments for that 05 to, 08 kind of time frame.
Yeah.
In the first combat deployment as a fighter pilot, doing the lots of sorties off of the aircraft carrier, is there one or a couple that stand out as being either the most memorable or the most impactful?
Yeah, there's certainly two that stand out. And my experience in combat in the air certainly pales in comparison with other people have done. I would never want to illustrate I had some crazy unique experience, and I would definitely tell you that my ground combat experience vastly overshadowed and outweighed anything I did in the airplane. And we can talk to it if not, it doesn't matter. You understand that as well as anybody. Being a FAC on the ground with a bunch of Navy SEALs changed my viewpoint of what combat was. But I remember two missions flying in Afghanistan. One was a mission where my wingman and I had gotten a target like 2 hours or some crazy amount of time before TOT, and having to plan a mission where we are flying up an hour to get into country, getting gas, setting a timing, doing this entire collaboration of me and my wingman to get to a series of targets, and how complex and how nuanced and how many different things we had to do to get a bomb onto a target at a particular place at a particular time with a really high degree of precision over such a long period of time. And it gave me a lot of appreciation for the complexity of fighting a war off a carrier and still being able to meet the needs of, the ground force commander and the overall commander of the battle space within a really, really tight tolerance. The Navy makes the impossible look routine. And I got to be a part of that by putting a couple of weapons with me and my wingman onto a target in a very long timeline within a matter of seconds. And it was a cool illustration of what the Navy has done with carrier aviation is they make it look easy.
Yeah.
They make it look like no big deal. Hundreds of jets on and off the carrier every day, hours into country, all these things are going on, putting a bomb on a target within a 10-second time frame. Yeah. And they make it look easy. And it's not. It's unbelievable what the U.S. Navy can do. It is mind-blowing. Yeah. I got to live that. Another one was a mission which a wingman and I, we were, and I don't even know who they were specifically. It was a soft team on the ground that essentially was doing a raid in a day VFR, very clear day, and they were in a spot where they had grabbed a couple guys and they were leaving, and they were overrun is the wrong word, but they were getting challenged by the locals, and they were like, "Hey, we need to get out of here. Can we get some help?" And they were using things like what are those orange panel? That hold the panels out.
Oh, yeah,
orange signal panel. Like, hey, can you just fly a couple of laps over us and scare these people? And I remember being on the radio, getting this call. My wing went up at 10,000 feet, and we had to get down to like very, very low altitude. Very uncommon for Afghanistan, and almost like a violation of the ROE, unless required from the ground force. No rehearsal, no communication, didn't know who they were. Just a couple guys going, hey, we're in trouble. Can you get down here? We never dropped a bomb, never shot our weapons. We had no collaboration and coordination to be able to do that coordination. But it was a realization of airplanes can be, when needed, can make a massive impact to people on the ground that need help.
Yeah.
It is a force multiplier, and the amount of time and money that goes into putting aircraft overhead, when the outcome of that is you can save some people from a really tough situation, you understand why we are willing to make such a massive investment. And I got to live that off carriers, which is just crazy scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah, the carrier capability with fighter jets is just remarkable.
Crazy.
It's absolutely incredible. I'm going to admit this is kind of a dumb question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Going to the bathroom and drinks and snacks or any like personal items
Good question.
that you bring into the cockpit.
Heck yeah. Afghanistan was like 7-hour missions routinely. And we were the night carrier. So when we got to Afghanistan, we had 2 carrier presence, they called it. And it was, I think I have it right, 8 in the morning to 8 at night for the day carrier, 8 at night to 8 in the morning for the night carrier. And so in my logbook, there's like some frame of time where I have like 47 days without seeing the sun, something crazy like that. Like you're just flying the night page and you're taking off, you're flying up, you're from takeoff to landing is like 7 hours. It's a long time, most of it at night. So you're bringing snacks, we called it a piddle pack, which is basically just a plastic bag with a sponge inside, and you're using it like 5-6 times.
You ever overflow it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, there are great stories of guys I can think of like coming back and piss themselves for sure, and all in good fun. But there's a logistics that goes along. And again, you're by yourself. I mean, that's the upside and the downside of being a single seat aircraft is you're up there, you're alone with all sorts of things, your thoughts, and all the demands that go in there. I hate to use the word routine because it's a bad word for combat, but there are things that become routine. And one of them is like, you're up there, and if you're going to be there for 7 hours, you're going to eat, you're going to go to the bathroom.
Is there a go-to snack?
Dude, I think it was like granola bars is the easiest thing in the world to eat up there. You don't want to bring anything elaborate up there. You don't want to bring anything that's going to work its way through you very quickly either.
Yeah. So no bran muffins with coffee.
Negative. Negative.
Is there a weirdest thing you ever took with you?
Dude, I'd bring magazines.
Really?
Yeah. And I'd like lock in these little racetrack patterns of like these little oval patterns. And the cool thing about the Hornet is mech'd, I'm doing because I can't help it, like it was mech'd very well to autopilot, altitude, and hold, and you could fly it with your knees. So the nice thing about a center stick aircraft is on autopilot, to put in a turn, you could do this and just bump your knee on it. And so I have to be careful when I say magazines.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of ranges of magazines that you would bring up there.
What do you mean?
Yeah, right. But there are times that you'd be flying up there and you would, I know this is terrible, you would be bored. You'd be bored because what you're really doing is waiting for someone to ask you to do something. And sometimes you never got called. Sometimes you were busy the whole time. But there are times, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I can still picture you're 15,000 feet over Afghanistan in a holding pattern with your wingman offset by 1,000 feet, waiting to hear from the KAOC or whatever to give you some guidance or instruction, or just waiting to go get gas because you're just overhead presence and you're just off in la la land just doing other things.
Do you
just
ever fall
crazy.
asleep?
You 100% fight staying awake. Now, it never happened to me. I've heard stories, but I never like fell asleep and like woke up like 20 minutes later. But I definitely did oh shit, I was asleep. Yeah. And it's probably seconds, like we called it the tactical head nod, that whole thing. That 100% happened to me in an airplane. Yeah. And then you wake up and like I said, it was probably seconds, but there's definitely time that you would do this and you'd come back to, being awake, and it was, there's you and your jet, it's ridiculous. Like what do you do? You wake up and, you're doing everything you can to stay awake.
I mean, I know like with our guys, they would give, Provigil and, to stay awake and then Ambien. Man, like
there were go pills. I never took them. I shouldn't say that. I took them once on one flight and it just completely screwed with my head. Some guys use them religiously. Like right before takeoff, I think they were called go pills. I don't remember exactly what it was. Some guys used them. Some guys use Ambien to sleep and go pills to stay awake. I never did that. I just acclimated to being on the night page, and I just had one time using it and I just didn't like what it did and I just didn't use it. But it's totally a normal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty, they get the doctor done. It's all prescribed. It's all managed, done correctly, but I never used it.
Yeah. Have you ever taken a shit inside of an airplane?
Never.
I mean, that's happened before, I imagine.
I think involuntarily it's happened. It never happened to me, thank God. But like I don't think there's a real option to do that in a single seat aircraft.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would be. It would be a nightmare.
Yeah. As far as like, in Top Gun, they show like the pictures, like, do you take any kind of personal mementos, anything like that?
I never did.
No.
I never took any. I had no superstitions. Nothing. I took nothing, like, I have no memory, like none of that stuff. Nothing inside of my helmet or none of that stuff.
Yeah. I am curious. I mean, is turbulence the same in a fighter jet, or is it? It feels totally different.
It feels different. Yes and no. Flying is different than being a passenger. So flying in turbulence you're more responsive to it. It doesn't have quite the impact to you, and like you're somewhat, because you're responding to it. It's not quite so bothersome. Being in the back of an airliner, scares the hell out of people.
Yeah.
And it's super disruptive. Airplanes behave differently, small single seat fighter, smaller wings and whatnot, but I've certainly had experience with turbulence in my life and my careers and flying in bad things. It feels very different flying it than it does being a passenger. It doesn't bother me, but in the back, when it's turbulent, I sit back and I kind of chuckle and laugh because I have no control over what's happening. Not that I ever did, but It's a very different feeling being a passenger.
Well, have you ever been on a racetrack in a car as a passenger?
I have. Been in
kind of like that.
And I had one lap in this. It was like a Porsche turbo on a racetrack, and the guy's like, "Hey, hop in," and he did, and it was like
terrifying.
Hated. I did not enjoy any of it. I mean, understood it was cool. I was like, "This is super cool." And he was really good at it, and I do not like being a passenger.
Yeah.
I do not like it.
Yeah. Well, did you drive it at all?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I imagine it's the same when you're driving. It's exciting and not
Loved
terrifying.
it.
Yeah.
Loved every second of it. And then when I went to it was being by myself, the best thing. And then we're like, "Hey, let me give you a demo of what it should look like," because I clearly was, this is like a professional race car driver.
Yeah.
Night and day. I got to see what performance should look like, and I didn't enjoy any of it.
Yeah. Was that the only car that you drove?
My only experience of like racing a car is what is called the Porsche experience in LA, PECLA.
Yeah.
That was like the coolest thing ever. You drive it, and it was on my birthday, so as like a little birthday present, they drove me around. That's the only experience I've ever had on a track.
Motorcycles at all?
I CBR 600. When I was living in San Diego, nothing controlled, nothing on a track or anything like that.
Have you ridden other bikes other than that, like cruisers or other sport bikes?
My Harley, back then, my best friend Neil was good. He had rode a bike, and we had friends, and we got to Julian and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mostly on his CBR every now and then with a cruiser, but
Yeah.
never like in a controlled environment, like on a track or anything like that.
Right. So the line of questioning is that I'm making assumptions because bikes and cars are a huge passion of mine.
Nice.
But I would kind of naturally ascertain that the F-16, 18, 22, F-35 are all like sport bikes.
Yes.
But there's enough nuance that where it's like you can tell the personalities, the way they
Yep.
handle are all very different.
That's exactly right. And I can't relate probably the way that you can, but like, if you had a CBR 600 and a Gixxer 1000, you're like, "Oh, these are super fast bikes." I'm like, these are very different bikes.
Yeah.
And from the outside, and probably 60 to 70% of them, it's all fine. But you get to the extremes of what those things can do. There's a lot of nuance, a lot of difference. That's fighter aviation, 100%.
So which of those airframes is kind of the baddest of all of
The
them?
Raptor is the machine, and it's not to take away from the other ones. An F-16 is just an obscenely powerful, amazing airplane. The Raptor is an exclusive machine that just lives in its own world. There's really nothing like it in the world, and that airplane just sits by itself atop a list of a lot of really great airplanes. The Raptor is unlike any other machine out there.
Excuse me, is there a adversarial platform that comes close?
Yeah, there are machines that Russians and Chinese are building airplanes that are comparable in terms of like objective performance and maneuverability. Capability, no. Nothing competes with the F-22 and F-35 in terms of capability, but there are near-peer performance machines, but they can't do the things that we do.
Can you speak to what the capabilities of the F-22 are that they don't have?
Yeah. Generically, I can. This is the way I've always described the F-22. It is the most impressive airplane you'll ever see. Go to an air show and you see the F-22 demo. Go to YouTube and search, aircraft flying demos. The Raptor is the most impressive machine you'll ever see. And the least impressive thing about the Raptor is how well it performs. And my point to that is what's unique about 5th gen fighter aviation, F-22s and F-35s, is what is happening on the inside. And that's the part that nobody sees that. When you look up at an air show, you certainly don't understand that. It's not being demonstrated or revealed. The ability for an aircraft, and the F-35 is by far the most capable in the world. It doesn't perform like an F-22, but in terms of what it knows and what it sees and where it can play, nothing like it. The uniqueness of these airplanes is their understanding of what's happening on the battle space, which, as you know, is the most important thing. Your firepower, your speed, your maneuverability, your flexibility, those are all great attributes. But, and I'm sure as a SEAL you would agree, is if you could only have one thing of value, and it could be, if I were to give you a list, like, what was your heaviest machine gun? What is your biggest capability? And information and understanding of the battle space is on there, you'd want that more than anything. If you knew what was going on, you could take an inferior force, if that makes sense, and that's the teams, right? Like, you don't win by just overwhelming force. You win through other means. And one of the most powerful means that I think you have when you are trying to dominate in warfare is if you know more than they do, if you understand what they're doing and they don't understand what you're doing, that gives you a huge advantage. I think in simplest terms, people focus on stealth, which is very valuable. If you can't see me and I can see you, clearly that's an advantage. But it's way more than just stealth. It's way more than you don't see me. It's that I see you, I see what you're doing, I see who you're doing with, I see what you're thinking about doing, I see the direction you're going, I see the decisions you're making, and I can be reactive to that and make decisions based on that in a range of spectrums. F-35 works in radio frequency, infrared, electro-optical, laser. It collaborates and shares information. And all of a sudden, you can paint this picture by which you have a totally dominant understanding of what is happening in three-dimensional space, and your threat has no idea you're even there. That is a gap in capability it's really hard to replicate. And what people tend to focus on is, the SU-27 does, pulls more G's. And you're like,
doesn't matter.
Okay. It'd be like saying like, you have a 5.56, they have a 7.62, that means they win. You're like, no. That is not what it means. Now, listen, love a 7.62 round. That's awesome. That is not why that person is going to. In fact, if you have dominance in all sorts of other categories, and the one area where you're inferior is the caliber of your weapon, no factor.
Right.
That is not to diminish the value of a big gun. But when you talk about information and understanding and collaboration and sharing and all those things, it diminishes the value of the objectively measurable things, which is how fast you go, how many G's you pull, how much gas you have. And people that ask those questions, you're like, oh, you don't get it.
Yeah. It sounds like it's the comparison would almost be like a SEAL platoon on night vision with radio and close air support against a gaggle of tribesmen with spears. Like, there's that big of a difference.
Well, even if you took a numerically superior force with, on paper, like a battalion that had all these different capabilities, and they had no idea where you were, what you were doing, you were there, you guys would wreak havoc. You'd wreak havoc. And it's the difference isn't that you had that your rifles were better. That almost had nothing to do with it. Right. So that disparity in information and the sharing of that creates a massive delta that's really hard to overcome. And people tend to focus on the tangible, which is speed, maneuverability, G's, radius of turn. You're like, I want you focusing on those things because I don't care about that.
To me, like it almost laughably sounds like the emphasis put on those would be more of a determining factor, like who's going to put on the best air show.
Yeah.
It's like this platform will because it can do the craziest stuff, but on the battlefield, it's not irrelevant. But
it's not. And what's crazy about the Raptor is that the Raptor, from a objective maneuvering ability, it's just there's nothing like it. Yeah. It turns it's the best airplane at that, and it has this incredible information. The F-35 is probably the best example because maneuvering, it's a great airplane. It's fast. It turns well. It's not a Raptor. But the information of what's happening inside that machine is exponentially better than anything that's out there. And that's where the advantage is.
How many F-22s would it have taken, going back to the time machine question, to stop Pearl Harbor or to completely shift the tide in the European front air campaign?
Very few.
Like two?
Like, took a division of F-22s, you're probably going to change the entire outcome of that scenario.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not joking. You took 4 of those airplanes.
Yeah. All right. So, one kind of last capability question or analogy question. From my understanding, the F-16 is the only single-engine plane of that group. Is that
F-35 is single engine as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Is the comparison of the 16 and the 35 kind of like the analog 2003 crotch rocket versus today's day and age of all the rider aids and traction control and ABS braking and all that? Like, is it a very analog aircraft by comparison?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, certainly a modern F-16 is incredibly impressive on the inside. I flew what's called a Block 15 F-16, which was an analog machine. And the F-16's roots definitely are evident in the F-35. So I think that comparison holds really well. There are still F-16s being built today that look nothing like their analog,
Wow.
brothers from dude, 70. It's like 50 years old.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
I mean, it reminds me a lot of the A-10 being, like it's still a very valuable
Totally. Yep.
aircraft.
Analog machine, incredibly capable. Yeah.
Is there a huge nimbleness difference between a single engine and dual engine? Or not really?
No, and in fact, like the engine, that really isn't an attribute to that. The F-16 is a really nimble, really powerful single engine aircraft. The Hornet, very, very maneuverable at slow speeds, twin engine. So it's really just a matter of, thrust to weight, some other design things that go into that, some AOA limitations, some computer limitations, but the number of engines isn't necessarily the driver behind that.
Yeah. Is it rated in horsepower or thrust or like how?
Thrust. Yep. That's exactly right. Yep.
Which one is the thrustiest?
Yeah. So the F-35, the F-35 engine, the F-135 is the name of the engine, 40,000 pounds of thrust, one engine. Raptor's got the F-119, 2 engines, 35,000 pounds each. That's 70,000 pounds. That's a bigger, heavier jet, but you're talking like those are like obscenely big numbers.
Yeah.
Like one engine, 40,000 pounds of thrust for the F-35 is insane.
Yeah. Is there a way to calculate that into horsepower?
There probably is, and that number would be obscenely high.
And give you the error message on the calculator, probably.
Totally, man. Yeah.
All right, so I'd love to get into your time on the ground being a bit of a fish out of water. I mean, I can only imagine. The only experience I have that would kind of relate is going through SEER school, where they would pair up guys like me with pilots.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like total fish out of water.
Yes.
Like, I'm not used to this shit, and I don't like it.
Yeah. Why are you hitting me?
Yeah. Well, just being on the ground and
Yes.
the sense of direction, navigation, everything is so different.
It is.
Did you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by
Yes,
that? Yeah.
the entire time. That was the ultimate out of my comfort zone experience. And I alluded to it earlier. Like I had this sense of wanting to be a Marine, doing this very unique Marine thing. And when I volunteered to be a FAC, the Marine Corps really didn't want me to do it. I left Topgun as the senior instructor at Topgun. I was a training officer. They're like, "Hey, you're pretty well trained. We invested a bunch of time and money to train you to be a fighter pilot. Go back to a fighter squadron and teach these guys all this stuff." Anyway, there's a lot of nuance behind it, but long story short, I kind of bullied my way into the FAC tour, which was supposed to be in Japan, to stand up a unit called Anglico. 5th Anglico was in Okinawa, and it was going to be like kind of a good deal year in Japan. I learned how to call airstrikes and teach a bunch of guys how to do it, but it's all going to be training and prep. And the good deal that came with that is I got guaranteed orders after that year in Japan to go back to Miramar to fly Hornets, which was awesome. As soon as I got to Japan, they were looking for volunteers to support the Camp Lejeune Anglico, 2nd Anglico on a tight turn to go to Iraq. So I went, volunteered. So my year in Japan ended up being like 90 days in Japan. Went to Camp Lejeune, and as soon as I got there, we started assigning locations, and I was the guy assigning the teams. We had like 26 small teams, and I put myself to Ramadi because my best friend, I was telling you, Neil, was a FAC in Ramadi. I knew that's where you needed to go. So we went to Ramadi. Anyway, long story short, I show up in Ramadi, and very shortly after I got there, Jocko's task unit shows up. And 7 months of just like in over my head.
Yeah.
Way over my head.
I'm sure you've been asked this a million times. What was your first impression of Jocko when you met him?
Totally intimidated.
Yeah.
There was a UFC fighter, Tito Ortiz.
Yeah.
I remember looking at Jocko and I'm like, it looked like Tito Ortiz as a SEAL. And just like, he was intimidating. He just had the presence about him and kind of looked scary. Obviously, you know Jocko. He's not like that. He's a normal guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an awesome guy. But I remember seeing him just like, what in the hell did I get myself into? I'm going on missions with these guys. The first time I saw him, I remember just being pretty intimidated.
Same question with Leif.
Leif was, I don't want to, Leif was like just he was a nice guy. And I don't mean it in like, I know there's like these like that has a negative, I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean like Leif was also just like a total stud, but he's like, hey man, he was super engaging, outgoing. He developed a relationship with us. Leif is the reason why our teams work together. And he dispelled the myth of like, I had an idea of what SEALs were, all preconceived. I'd never worked with SEAL. I don't think I even met a SEAL. But I knew SEALs in my own, a bunch of arrogant, cocky. Leif was none of those things. Leif was professional. He was awesome. And my relationship with him was the reason why we worked together. Was Leif came to me. It was like, hey, you guys are doing this thing. Can you help us with these missions? And he and I ended up becoming really, really close. And I worked very closely with him. I was there for a lot of missions with him. He certainly looked all the part of a Navy SEAL, but he was such a good dude to me. And I always had this impression like SEALs would be like standoffish and like, we're better than you, and not, he was the exact opposite of that, man. And so when I say that, I mean that in the absolute best possible use of that term. He was an awesome person to me and dispelled all the myths I had of like, oh, these are gonna be a bunch of arrogant, special operators. He dispelled that myth very quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was all those guys, you guys, they were awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I mean, to me, I think, nice in that context can be taken in a harmless way, and it's not,
Nope.
and I know exactly what you mean, because I know Leif, not well, but yeah, I can totally see that aspect of it.
He demystified the mystique of the SEALs, which is well deserved, by the way. That impression that you get is valid because you look at them, you look at Leif, you look at Jocko, like, dude, these dudes are badasses. He dispelled the standoffish, better than you, elevated. He wasn't like that at all. Yeah. And that, I think, is what allowed us to have a really good relationship.
Yeah. At its inception, was there a very understood understanding of, allow myself to introduce myself, was it understood exactly what capability you were going to provide, or was there a kind of an evolution of figuring out how to best use you guys?
Yeah, I think what started it was, so I had got there about 6 weeks before Task Unit Bruiser showed up. And in the 6 weeks, I was working with the National Guard unit that was getting ready to leave, and we did a ton of operations with them, and it was kinetic quickly. Like, those dudes had been in the fight for a year. Those dudes are awesome. I was learning a lot from them, stealing all their knowledge, all their conventional wisdom, and I very quickly changed the way I thought we were going to operate. I thought I was going to be like in the COC, kind of maneuvering battle space, and I was like, these guys need our help. I got engaged with my teams very quickly, myself included. And because we had learned very quickly how to support, when Leif's platoon showed up, when Jocko's task unit, Leif's platoon specifically, I was out in the west with Charlie platoon. There's another Anglico out in the east in Corregidor with Delta platoon. So I mostly work with Leif. We were essentially continuity between the old unit and the new unit. So when he showed up, we were part of this brigade turnover. We were right in the middle of all of that. The brigade that we were there really treated us like their own. And I think Leif saw that we were really closely embedded and had a really good relationship. And I think that was compelling to him because Jocko's guidance was we're there to support the Army, which is why we were there. My team was there as well. And I think very quickly, Leif saw that we brought some unique capability, which obviously the aircraft, we had a Humvee, we had heavy machine guns. We had a lot of really cool assets that were there to support the Army. The asset I think that was most relevant to them was Task Unit Bruiser and Charlie Platoon had JTACs. They had guys that could call in airstrikes. But as you know, as a SEAL, if you're calling in air and controlling all that stuff, you're not doing some of the primary SEAL stuff. I, whether I wanted to or not, was in the ground scheme and maneuver. I didn't want to be a SEAL. I wanted to call in airstrikes and use aircraft. And we had Hornets and Harriers, which I knew really well. I was a Hornet pilot. We had Cobras and Hueys, which I knew well because I was a Marine. And so there was this really natural synergy because we had this really unique capability that they needed that in theory they could have done themselves, but they probably couldn't have done it the way that we did because they didn't quite have our experience. We had some time on the ground for some understanding, and they could better use their SEALs who were JTAC qualified in more primary SEAL missions. And so all that sat between us was the risk of ego, personality, this, that, and none of that was there. Those guys, they were not like that. It was the exact opposite of what I thought they were going to be. And they were like, hey, let's do whatever makes sense to support the Army. And that meant my Anglico team and my particular firepower team that I kind of was central to really embedded with Leif's platoon. And every operation, we were with them because we could optimize the aircraft assets in a way that they couldn't, that freed them up to do, there's only 16 SEAL, you know that, you know this better than anyone. And if you're taking away from one of their primary missions to something else, that takes away from what they can be doing. And we plugged into that and it worked really well.
Yeah. Did the pilots that you're communicating with have any idea that you were actually a pilot also?
Yeah, 100%.
All of them did?
Just about all of them. I'm controlling Marine Air.
Okay.
And so, there are times, my favorite story from Ramadi in Iraq in 2006 is doing Type 1 gun runs. That's like low altitude Hornet strafe in this kinetic firefight that we're in, getting RPG shot at us. I'm sitting behind this wall with this Army platoon leader. The aircraft that comes in overhead and his check-in to me as the aircraft, the F-18 checks out on my TAC frequency as the FAC. He says, Chip, this is Boo. What do you need? And it was my former OPSO from my previous squadron, who was a good friend of mine, whose call sign was Boo. None of the protocol, none of the 9-line. It was, hey, dude, it's me. He knew who I was. He knew I was there. And I looked over I'm like, we're good to go. Yeah. And it was a personal friend of mine flying the F-18s. And next thing you know, him and his wingman are doing strafing runs on vehicles. Like, here, my arm standing up thinking about those stories. Like, you can't get any better than that, which is like, dude, this is my friend. Yeah. We deployed together. We're good to go. And that was awesome. That was the Marine Corps. Every Marine is a rifleman. Like, that's what the Marine Corps believes in. That's what they banked on. That's why I joined the Marine Corps. And I got to live that in Ramadi over and over again.
It's an easy assumption to make that having you communicating with pilots is the obvious leg up than a JTAC guy, a SEAL JTAC qualified, communicator. Is there a most obvious advantage that you have knowing exactly what the pilots are dealing with and going through?
100%. And it really, more than anything, is just perspective. The SEAL JTACs were totally good to go, totally qualified, easily could have done the same missions that I did. What it would have taken them is time to collaborate and understand what is the pilot seeing at 15,000 feet, at 10,000 feet, collateral damage, additional risk, perspective on where civilians might be, where additional risks and things fall in. When I'm talking to a pilot, I don't have to spend a lot of time wondering what his perspective and his point of view looks like. So as he's talking to me, my mind's eye very quickly can be in his machine. And listen, the world just looks different at 15,000 feet than it does in the ground. I was learning this in the opposite order, right? I had done deployments from the air. I clearly understood what the world looks like from the cockpit. When you're on the ground, the biggest difference is everything looks flat. You see the road in front of you. You see the very often, parallel intersections, things like that. You don't get a very global view of things and a lot of this was urban. Streets, like Ramadi is like a city. It's crazy, and sometimes if you're on a street corner, you might see down one road and not another road. That's all. You don't see anything else. Buildings are too tall. Things are getting in the way. So when I'm talking on an airplane, the advantage that I brought was a JTAC, a SEAL would have to spend time asking him, what do you think? Why do you, and there'd be friction in us trying to just get a common point of view. I can compress that timeline. And as you know, especially in urban releasing an urban is really tough. You don't have a lot of time. You got to do that really, really quickly and accurately. That was the biggest advantage that I brought.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a fascinating and seems like one of those almost obvious things to have pilots do that mission. And I know they do. It seems like it could be leaned on even heavier. Like maybe a scenario where once you get to a certain point in your career, and I imagine that being a pilot is similar to an operator or even a professional athlete, where age is not your best friend, and you get to a point where it's like, hey man, your knowledge is there, but your reaction time sucks physically. Like you can't pull the same G's. Like there's a shelf life.
Yeah.
It's like once you get to that point, are you better served training and teaching other pilots, or would it make sense to have you either teach JTAC courses or even be on the ground doing that kind of thing?
Yeah. It's an interesting question because, you know this really well. Being on the ground was a slog for me, man. I mean, that was like the shit that you guys were doing that I was trying to keep up doing. I was like, man, I'd be so much better in a cockpit. I mean, I have some vivid memories, down baseline in Ramadi, running with SEALs, 300-yard run to get to a building, thinking, how are these guys, like, how can a human being run this fast with all this shit that we're carrying? Yeah. So I think there's certainly there's a balance inside there. The cockpit's a really nice equalizer because the machine does a lot, but there's absolutely, to your point, there's a uniqueness in that perspective and being able to help people see the world in a different way, which is the hardest thing about being on the ground, is you have to see it three-dimensionally, and it's really, really hard because the world kind of lives in two dimensions on the ground. I see the street, I see the road. I have to visualize what's happening around it because that's how I make good tactical decisions. It's really hard to do that. The pilot's perspective is huge.
Well, especially if you've never seen it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're imagining everything.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Is there an operation that stands out with your time on the ground with Bruiser that you felt like you made the biggest difference or were the most effective?
Yeah, for sure. I did a lot of missions with Leif's platoon. Obviously, I had my toughest day was June 20th, 2006. My radio operator was killed by a sniper on a rooftop of Cop Iron. That was a really hard day. First Anglican Marine killed in Iraq was one of my Marines. That was a hard thing. August 2nd was the day Mark Lee was killed. Is the first SEALs killed from Task Unit Bruiser was Jocko's platoon. I was the controlling FAC. And in that firefight, Leif is central to that. They are taking fire from an adjacent building, a second-story window, shooting down onto the SEALs making entrance. I'm controlling a Huey and a Cobra. The JTAC from Leif's platoon and I are coordinating. He is telling me what's going on in this, as you know, an insanely chaotic situation. And I am able to take a Cobra and put a Hellfire, a thermobaric Hellfire into the second-story window, like directly into the window of where this fire was coming from, to kill those guys in the middle of this engagement. And obviously it's a very double-edged sword for me because that was a hard day, and it was a really hard thing to meet them at Charlie Med and see the aftermath of that and know that a SEAL had been killed and the guys had been wounded. But I was able to contribute in a way to help them get out of that problem by using aircraft in the ideal way, which is rotary wing right over top of the city, literally putting a missile through a window, which the Huey and the Cobra pilot that did the mark and did the release is on the controlling FAC, all being fed by the Navy, by the SEAL JTAC. So I got to give them full credit for that. But to be able to be part of that and help them get out of that problem in the traditional sense of we're there to support those guys on what was really the hardest day for them on that deployment. I'm honored to have been right there with them for that.
Yeah, that's powerful. Were you still working with them when Mikey Mansour was killed?
I left about a week before Mikey was killed. Yeah, I left mid-September. That was, I think, September 27th. Yeah. I left about 10 days prior.
How close did you become with the SEAL operators from those platoons? Like, did you spend a lot of off time with them?
So I would genuinely say this, and I think Leif would agree. Like, Leif is like a brother to me. I was closest with him because of his role as the platoon leader, platoon commander, and I was the Anglico team lead. So a lot of the integration, I was literally with Leif, physically with him on all those missions. And it was really interesting for me. And I certainly never understood the magnitude of this, but Leif's lead sniper and point man was Chris Kyle. And so I had this really amazing experience being on rooftops, and a lot of times, and I didn't know who he was, and I didn't know, this is back in 2006, I didn't know what he would end up being, becoming, and the uniqueness of his life, this incredible thing that he, as a sniper, would say, hey, can you come look at this? And he would always ask me to look down his scope of his rifle, and he would see things, and I would have aircraft, and he and I did a lot of collaborating. It was always Chris, Leif, and me in these unique situations, first people into Cop Falcon, first people into these different locations, because of the roles that we all filled and had this unique synergy. Certainly on my deployment there, and obviously there's several names that come to mind. I don't know who I should say by name just based on what they're doing, but Leif and I became really, really close. And I certainly are obviously to this day rooted in that. But the relationship that I built with his platoon is probably the thing I'm the most proud of in my entire military career, because first of all, what you guys do is incomparable to what I've ever seen anybody do in a situation, in a combat environment like that. And I felt like I was barely hanging on. And Leif's SEALs treated me like one of their own, and treated my Marines like that too, which I know is a compliment. I know that you guys are not flippant and careless with that, and the willingness to bring us along and have us be partners in that. When we left, the Charlie Platoon guys came down to our hooch and said goodbye to us, like the patches. Like there's a moment there of realizing, had those guys not included me the way that they did, I don't know what would happen on that deployment. But it made a huge difference in my life and a huge difference in my Marines' lives, and I'm super, super proud of that. And that laid a foundation for Leif and certainly for Jocko and I to be close with them years and years later, all built on our time together and those shared experiences, of which I am supremely grateful for my time working with the SEALs.
That's awesome. I mean, it's an obvious testament to you and your guys' competency level also, because that involvement isn't, as to your point, handed out flippantly or easily. So
yeah, I had sharp guys. Yeah. The Marines on my team, I was given a winning hand with those guys. They're solid Marines.
That's awesome. Is there any other operation during that window of time there on the ground that stands out as being memorable? I mean, I know all of them were, but does one kind of come to mind?
Yeah, I have one that I remember. I mean, listen, we did a lot of stuff together. Man, I don't know if I could pick one. Cop Falcon was a combat outpost that ended up being dead center of the city of Ramadi. It was the biggest, boldest move we had made to put a combat outpost right in the middle of the most contested battle space that we had in downtown Ramadi, on the intersection of Sunset and Baseline. To get into Cop Falcon, Leif's platoon was going to be the lead platoon for that. I was with his platoon. They had these Marine riverine boats. And so if you know the geography of Ramadi, you were basically kind of the northwest corner. They had coordinated with the Marines. The Marines showed up in these little riverine boats. And there's a canal that parallels, kind of northwest to southeast, parallels the city on the south side. And so Leif SEALs, my Marines, essentially in the middle of the night, quietly board up onto these riverine boats and kind of float down this canal. It was like full moon, like it's out of Vietnam. Like it was a crazy scene. Like we were on these boats, like crystal clear water, super quiet, down to the canal. And so we do this riverine boat insertion, off the boats, move up, across the creek and into the southwest corner there to get into Cop Falcon. First guy over the wall is Chris Kyle. Second guy is Leif Babin. Third guy is Dave Berke. Clear out Cop Falcon, ended up on the roof of Cop Falcon, which started the first day of our operations in South Central Ramadi was Cop Falcon, was this riverine insertion, which was like you want to talk about like, what am I doing here? Like, what in the fuck am I doing here? Dave Berke, F-18 pilot, former Topgun instructor, we're on these boats, infilling in there. Leif engaged guys on the way in, like, and I'm like over the wall, clearing the building with these guys, and like, just what the fuck is going on?
How did I get here?
How did I get here, man? A couple days later, there's this really to me, it's famous. I don't know if it's famous. There's a picture of me and Jocko asleep on the roof of Cop Falcon like 48 hours later. Somebody snagged a picture. I'm sitting next to him. We're both just like out cold because it's the first time in 2 days we could sleep. But I was on the initial movement to take over this thing that became Cop Falcon, and just started on these riverine boats. It was a surreal moment for me as a fighter pilot. Like, dude, how did I get here? But one of the highlights of my time in ground combat.
That's some frogman shit.
It was some frogman shit, dude. I was along for the ride, believe me. I'm sure if you talk to Leif, I think I probably walked around with eyes like saucers a lot of that deployment, just kind of hanging on with you guys. But I have other great memories of Charlie Platoon and Tony and a bunch of other just amazing guys. I was very lucky to be part of that, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a legendary crew, in the entire scope of the war. I think it's hard to argue that there's a more... that there's a more synonymous group of guys related to getting it than that task unit at that time in that location. There's a lot of SEAL platoons that did a lot of good stuff, but there's just so many stories and it's the converging of so many other intangibles and factors within the entire Iraq campaign that all kind of converged at the same time to make that such a legendary deployment.
Well, we talked about luck, timing, circumstance, that convergence. Obviously, I had no control over any of that timing. But to look back and think the one fact tour that I was on, same place, same time, was with those guys. And to be in a position where they were willing to let us be part of that and our teams integrate like that.
I do see a recurring theme in your career of first or
crazy,
only to ever... there's got to be something to it. You can't get lucky that many times, without there being some external influence. Politics aside, Iraq, looking back on it now, and of course it's easy to, hindsight being 2020, be critical of our involvement. But I am curious, as somebody who has both spent, time on the ground in a really heavy emotionally heavy capacity, and tens of thousands of feet above the ground. What are your thoughts, kind of reflecting on Iraq as a general foreign policy decision?
It's an interesting question. So I have two very different competing thoughts in my own brain on that, and we didn't talk about it, but after I finished my CO tour, I went to Johns Hopkins and got a fellowship and earned a master's in public policy from Johns Hopkins, and got to see this educational aspect of the world, this global public policy world in a very different point of view. I think the reason why I have, I guess, a little bit of a long-winded and competing answer is because I did not, and it's my own fault, it's something I should have been more cognizant of, but if you can picture Marine Corps Major Dave Berke just leaving Top Gun, now leading assault of Marines, 13 Marines, 3 4-man teams, and a corpsman, running around the battlefield with a bunch of Navy SEALs, shooting his rifle, getting shot at, repeat, all the crazy shit that I was doing. You can imagine I was barely hanging on. In places where you and the SEALs were confident and comfortable and aggressive, I very much felt like, holy crap, I have got to keep up here. I've got to do my part. I really did not have a good strategic sense of the impact and value that we were contributing to until much later. In fact, I don't think I really understood the impact we were making until I joined Echelon Front and watched Jocko give the first brief on Ramadi and the strategic impact that we were making. I was very tactical, and my objective and responsibility was take care of my Marines, take care of the soldiers we were supporting, be a good teammate to the SEALs, use the assets overhead, and bring everybody home alive. And I never questioned, and nor do I to this day. I don't mean that there's some evolution there. I never questioned the legitimacy, the necessity, because when you're there, you are so busy trying to do those things, you don't think about it. I am open to all sorts of criticisms. I'm open to all sorts of legitimate concern, the policy decisions, hindsight. I'm open to all those things, and I don't push back. I think that's a good conversation for people to have. Should we? Were the reasons legitimate? All those things are fair. I wasn't thinking about any of those things at the time. It was just come back home, bring my Marines back, be be a good Marine, contribute. What I did come to realize, though, that I didn't realize, especially when we're getting news like 6 months after we left, they're running a 5K down Route Michigan, which was a place you got IED'd 15 times 6 months earlier. We were an instrument for good in an environment that otherwise simply, undeniably could not have created for themselves. That, and again, this is not pushback. This is not an argument against. This is just perspective that I have, which was we contributed in ways that were, Mike, infinitely more than I realized at the time, that supported, you can make an argument for anything from American grand strategy all the way to just the societal impact to the human beings that lived in that town. I think what was challenging for me was my inability to recognize that, because I was so overwhelmed with my tactical role and barely being able to feel like I was contributing to that correctly. It took all of my brain power, which is, are we on the right street? Do I have the right map? Am I talking to the right airplane? Am I in the right place? Am I doing and saying the right things? Am I picking the right weapon for this environment? It took like 10 years to be able to reflect back on that and go, holy cow, I don't even know what we really did. And I have to reconcile and recognize that I'm wrestling with the loss of a Marine. Chris Leon was my Marine, did not come home. My son is named after him because I lost a Marine there. It took a decade to understand the larger scope of the impact that we made, both on a policy strategy level, but also the impact of the population that we were actually there to help. And I think the range of those things, hyper tactical, strategic, and grand strategic, I got to live in a place that really covered the whole arc of that. And for better, for worse, for right or for wrong, and again, I don't push back on any of the debate, the contribution that we made is undeniable. Undeniable. Do you want to have a discussion about the cost of it? Yes. And I, in a very micro level, understand that cost. It was one Marine. I cannot claim that I endured something that is unheard of in military history, but I understand the discussion. I know that what we did was massively impactful in all three of those scopes, and I was a contributor to that. It took a lot of time to figure that out, but I know that is true.
Yeah. Well, and to me, I look at very similarly. I like the tactical, strategic, macro, or is that what you use, macro?
I said grand strategy, right? But yeah, same point, same thing.
Yeah, I think there's almost levels to that, even in that that's still within the scope of a tactical application of a policy.
Yep.
I guess what I'm curious of, and to me, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's more just I'm curious what you think of. If you take like 1,000 steps back or above, the not even the 30,000 foot view, the 100,000 foot view of if as we sit here in 2025 and look back at Iraq as if you want to call it a light switch moment or a go or no go decision, I agree with you completely in that the way that everybody that we asked to go there and do what we asked them to do. There's so many, countless examples of heroic, legendary, selfless sacrifice that took place and really epitomizing the American spirit on so many different levels over and over and over for a sustained amount of time. I just wonder even though politics, I'm not, I guess, looking for a political debate or discussion even, it's just, do you think Iraq, generally speaking, as a go, no go, a yes, no, do you think it was a good idea? Like, do you think that we should have done it?
Had we been able to influence the outcome differently, it'd be an easier yes for me. Because there's a big part of me that's like, there's an undeniable yes inside both of those wars if the outcome was less tethered and more open to the potential that we could have achieved. Inside the limited part of that, I struggle with Iraq more than I do Afghanistan in terms of the go, no go criteria. And bear in mind too, like Afghanistan for me was like post 9/11, a couple months, not even 6 weeks later, we're there. And when we left the following May, like it was kind of over. We stopped dropping bombs. It kind of gotten quiet. And so I'd never envisioned that, the arc. I think I would have an easier time looking at it saying absolutely, had we had more long-term control over the outcome we were trying to achieve. That's where I think it gets really foggy for me on the frustration that I feel in that And dude, I'm open to that. This is a question that should be asked. I don't think anybody should shy away. This is the right question. My answer is tempered by the outcome, I think, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I don't necessarily subscribe to the Machiavellian end justifying the means. Having said that, for me at least, it's impossible not to look at, okay, what did we get from it, where we're at now, which I know is exactly your point. For me, that's what I struggle with, is that, because I was in the same boat. I mean, I was in my early 20s. The prospect of, is this a good idea or not, was never anywhere in my mind, let alone at the forefront.
Yep.
It was, you know, I volunteered to give up to and including my life, and if the U.S. government asks me to do it, then I will do it, and I'll do it to the best of my ability, and same with everybody I'm working with. And and there's a beautiful purity in that, I think, too, that is a special experience that we all share, which I'm thankful for, frankly, irrespective of what we think now. I do find it hard, though, to justify looking at what we gave up, the men that didn't come home, for what it is now.
Yep.
And not even just in Iraq. I mean, there is an unfortunate reality that existed prior to the toppling of Saddam regionally, where there wasn't a vacuum of authority and power and influence and intimidation that he provided throughout all the contiguous countries surrounding him.
Yep.
You know, because I think it is a fair question, and one you could, I think, pretty reasonably say yes to, in asking, did doing what we did in Iraq actually create Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran's emboldening of influence in the region to a degree with which we've never seen, and now we're struggling with far worse than we would have if Iraq would have never happened.
Yeah.
Again, of course it's easy to sit here now and say it, and I want to be fair in that, you know, 2 years after 9/11, being punched in the mouth the way that we were, I can understand being at the helm and saying, never again, we will preemptively do X, Y, and Z to avoid that from happening, and being probably considerably more aggressive than we would have been pre-9/11 in that regard. So I'm not lost on that, but I think, you know, one of the things in terms of honoring the loss of life that did take place in both Iraq and Afghanistan, I think it's important to try to learn from that, you know.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that was one of the best years of my life, is being engaged in those discussions and debates on all sides. And I think it's healthy to have that conversation, and to also, I'm tainted by my experience by that too, 100%. And I don't shy away from the bias that I have with that. And I think, to your point too, like, it's all retrospective for me. In February of 2006, when I hopped on a plane from Camp Lejeune or wherever it was to go out to Iraq, I wasn't contemplating the necessity, the validity of any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just exactly, you described it exactly what was in my mind.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think for a functioning military, they have to all be bought in that way.
100%.
Or you're going to be useless or almost useless.
That's right.
When that deployment wrapped up, you mentioned prior to that you were kind of on the cusp of retiring. Sounds like that deployment completely changed your attitude towards staying in, or
No. I was 100% committed after that deployment to getting out.
Really?
Which is kind of ironic, because we all know what happened. That deployment solidified the feeling that I had that everything I'd ever thought about doing in the Marine Corps, I had done. You can imagine that factor was 100 times more than I ever expected. It was that, I'm understating it with 100 times more.
Yeah.
That factor was the most significant year of my life. And what I'd seen and done and experienced and endured was well beyond anything, which meant whatever remained in my head of, like, hey, the childhood dreams, the fantasies, the Marine Corps, all that stuff was done. And so I came back from that deployment. I applied to grad school, got accepted to grad school, paid my non-refundable deposit to grad school, and was 100% getting out. I had informed my command. I had dropped my letter. I put in I was going to leave the military. I got stationed back in Miramar, and I got accelerated to a position. I was the operations officer and the number 2 executive officer of a squadron, and was asked to deploy to help the squadron go on a deployment. And so I deferred my admission for a year to grad school to make this deployment. Went on the deployment with everyone knowing I was getting out at the end of that deployment.
And then
on that deployment, I mean, I'd gone out to Hanover, New Hampshire with my wife and like picked out a place to rent. Like, I'm talking like there was no debate. We weren't like, I was done. My CO, my squadron commander when I was in my Afghanistan deployment was now the group commander when I'm back. My biggest ally, I had told him I'm getting out. Everybody knew I was out. On that deployment, I'm the XO of an F-18 squadron deployed to Japan. The solicitation for applications to be the F-22 exchange pilot came out on that deployment.
Man. And once again.
And yeah. And ironically, they were looking for a Topgun instructor with fighter experience who had finished his department head tours as an operations officer. Like, on paper, like I think 150 people applied, but I was in a very competitive spot. And right as that deployment's ending, I find out I'm selected for the Raptor exchange.
Yeah.
It's like January of 2008. I get the nod that I'm gonna go fly the F-22.
So is it you call the wife and say, unpack your shit, honey?
It was, yeah. So I'm on that deployment, and I remember sending the like, hey, there's this thing.
What kind of mood are you in right now?
And to her credit too, like I got to give my wife a ton of props. So my wife and I got married in May of 2005. I did one more class at Topgun, and I went to my FAC tour. And so, I mean, we got married and I deployed to Iraq, and I came home from Iraq, not the same guy that I went out there with. And I deployed to this Japan tour 6 months later. So she knows me from, dating as a Top Gun instructor to like back-to-back deployments, the whole thing. So when I was like, hey, this Raptor thing, she was like, hey, whatever you want. She wasn't like meek and like, she was generally like, hey, I'm good with whatever you do. She was her own person. She was a physical therapist. She could kind of live and survive and thrive anywhere. She was very open-minded, and she hadn't fallen in love with the, like, you said you're going to get out and you promised. None of that. It was like, hey, whatever you want. I'm cool with it. She was excited to go to New Hampshire because she's from Connecticut, but she also had no resistance to the idea. So in some sense that was good. In another sense, it was bad, because if she had a strong opinion, if she was like, wait a second, this is more than I bargained for, you promised me, I would have very easily made the decision to not do this.
Yeah, Dave Berke with no guardrails.
Exactly.
Who knows what's going to
happen. Exactly. So she's like, yeah, sure, I'm cool. And she meant it genuinely. Like I said, not like in a deferential, like, oh, whatever. She was cool with it. And I'm like, hey, I'm not going to get it anyway. What are the chances? So I apply. And I remember getting it. I get the standard naval letter or whatever the message traffic comes out and my name's on there. And, I'm like weeks from coming home from this deployment. I'm like, well, she kind of laughs. And like, so we moved to Tyndall, Tyndall, Panhandle of Florida instead of New Hampshire.
Was it one spot or were there a few? One spot.
It's the first and only exchange the Marine Corps has ever done to fly the F-22.
Wow.
Never happened before, never happened since.
Yeah. God, it's crazy.
It's crazy,
again,
dude.
It's like
it's crazy.
All these things happen.
It's totally crazy.
Do you buy lottery tickets?
I should have, man.
Can you buy me one?
Yeah, I think all my luck was used up on that. I don't think I'm good on the lottery. But yeah, dude, it's crazy. It's crazy.
What was your first impression getting in the cockpit of
the
F-22?
That thing is just...
It's like getting in a Ferrari.
It's the best. It's like... It's everything as a fighter pilot, it's everything you could ever want. So
it's the brochure you thought you were.
It is. If you like driving race cars, it's Formula One.
Yeah.
There is nothing better than that. And I'd spent my career. I'd done NASCAR and IndyCar, and you'd be like, that's pretty awesome, right? Like, that is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
There's no level above the F-22.
Yeah.
That's it. So when you're in that thing, and as the only Marine, you're like, dude, come on.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
How difficult or maybe not difficult from the 16, the 18, 22, 35, like, are they similar enough to where you can climb in and at least have a good understanding of how to do it, or is it like
No.
learning a new language?
I struggled. I had a really hard time. Now, flying is easy. Like getting in the airplane, like the first part of flying the F-22 is you learn how the systems work, the fuel system, the electrical system, and then like navigating around, super easy. Flying, you can from the Hornet to the Viper to the F-22, flying it is easy. So there's no real steep learning curve there. You take a couple of flights and you just get used to the nuance. It's very easy to do. Operating it tactically, I really struggled. There's an entire chapter that I wrote about on my transition about change and resistance to change and the natural resistance to change. I was a mess learning to fly that airplane. I really struggled. It was very humbling. It was a gut check for me to have to admit that all the things that I'd done that got me there were not going to help me.
Yeah. Wow. Did your instructors know that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Did you tell them that, or they could just tell?
Everybody had their struggles. Transitioning from 4th to 5th gen, just about everybody there was an F-15 pilot learning to fly the Raptor. And there's a transition. It's a 4th gen, it's a legacy platform to a modern platform. But these are Air Force guys doing Air Force things, flying Air Force tactics, using Air Force words, living Air Force jets. Eagle to Raptor is like a very natural transition. Still hard. They still struggle with it. I show up and everything is different. You know how it is in the Navy and the Air Force. Like everything is different. Every word is different. Every movement in everything is different. And when I started to try to operate it tactically, like how are you going to fight in this airplane? I was a total disaster. Wow. And thank God, and I literally wrote about this. Thank God for the patience of those instructors knowing like this dude is going to struggle. And it wasn't just a struggle in knowing what to do. My ego was getting annihilated because I'm thinking like, dude, I flew F-16s, I flew F-18s. I was a senior instructor, Topgun. I was a forward air control. I've been in combat. I'm hand-picked for this job. And I show up there and it got to a place where I did not know what to do. I could not understand what I was supposed to do in the airplane. And had not been for the less experienced, more junior Air Force instructors, patience and helping me, I would have failed.
Wow.
I would have failed in that program.
What amount of time transpired from the day you showed up until you felt like, okay, now I've got it?
If I could like ballpark it, it's about 6 months before your brain's like, oh, okay, I think I understand this now. And then the rest of the time is just getting good at it. Yeah. I think it probably was twice as long for me that it was for, and I'm being super generic, but I bet you if I was to just put a number on it, take your average Air Force pilot from previous airplane to current airplane, about 3 months, took me twice as long.
Right. Do you train jiu-jitsu?
Not as much as I should. I have trained and I am not currently, but yes.
Because to me, it
totally understand the, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds similar, is that like, there's just a point where it's like, I get it. And from there, like you can always get better.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the part that you probably understand too is in the beginning, you're like, I don't understand. Nothing I'm doing is working. Yeah. Why isn't this working?
Yeah, like I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes.
Let alone how to do it.
And to make it even worse, and this is another thing with jiu-jitsu, is like your instinct is always wrong. Yeah. Like the instinct to turn away or show something, like your natural reaction is almost always the wrong thing to do.
Yeah. Similar in the plane?
From 4th to 5th gen, and I'll keep it somewhat simple, is like these 5th gen airplanes, the Raptor and F-35, one of the biggest advantages is operating in a place where you're not supposed to be, and you know this as a SEAL, is we call it signature management, stealth, just being undetected. When you're in a Hornet or an F-16, you don't spend any time thinking about being undetected because they see you from the second you take off. And you know they see you, so you don't think about whether they see you. You don't operate wondering if you, as my adversary, know where I am. So all the decisions you make have that assumption buried into your brain. You don't contemplate it. Your biggest advantage, shouldn't say biggest, one of the biggest advantages you have in these modern aircraft is the ability to operate without being detected. So all of the decisions you make is designed to preserve that. And so think about it as a platoon on an infill. Do you want people to know where you are? And the answer is no. Fucking it. So you'll make all sorts of decisions just to preserve the element of surprise. And I'm being very generic in that term, but to preserve that element. But all of your habits and their instincts are the opposite of that. And so literally even just turning, like, why are you turning? Like, because
It seems like
I should. And you're like, now they're going to see you if you do that kind of thing. And again, I'm paraphrasing, I'm keeping it somewhat generic, but the part about flying an airplane too is like, especially when there's high Mach 1, big closure rates, thousands of miles an hour, we're closing very quickly. You don't want to be sitting in your jet going, all right, let me think about this for a second here. What should I do? You don't want to spend any time doing that. You want to think like that. And somebody would take me 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds to be like a child trying to think through a problem, and then it's over. And like,
too late.
It's way too late. Like way too late. The habits that you use, the natural subconscious decisions you make in a 4th gen plane do not translate well to a 5th gen plane. So not only do you not know what to do, when you rely on basic habits, they're the worst thing to do. So you're just, it's the worst feeling in the world being in the cockpit of an F-22 and like either doing nothing or doing the wrong thing over and over and over again. Wow. At some point the light bulb comes on, just like you alluded to, and you go, oh. And then you're just now trying to just get better and better, which over time I improved. Nobody's ever going to put me in the history of world's greatest Raptor pilots, but I did crack the code, and it just took a long time. It was hard. It was really hard, very humbling.
As an operator on the ground, it's very obvious when you realize that they can now see you. I assume it's less obvious, but is there still an obvious way that, okay, now I know they can see me, and what is that? Yeah,
there's visual, They do things with their systems and they do things with their airplanes when they see you.
Okay.
And it may be even just to change that, it's very obvious when they don't see you.
Okay.
Maybe not quite as obvious when they do, but you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
And you can tell by the things they're doing, the emissions and whatnot. But you can fly your flight and like, I know they don't see me.
Yeah.
And the reason you know they don't see you is if they knew where you were, they'd be doing something very different. And that's the best feeling in the world. You know that when you're assaulting an objective and like, oh, they don't know we're here. It's
weapon slung, smoking a cigarette. Like, I know you don't see me.
It's such a dominant position. It's such a mind-blowingly dominant position.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. How long did you fly the F-22?
Almost 4 years.
Wow.
3 years and 9 months.
Did you do deployments with it?
No.
Of all of the airframes, I assume just like when you test drove the Porsche on the track, you know, and really any time you test drive any car that's maybe very different than what you're used to, with sports and supercars, there are very obvious personalities to the car, whether it's a Porsche, Ferrari, McLaren, Lamborghini, whatever. Is there that same kind of the first time that you flew each one of these, comparing it to what you're used to, that you're like, wow, that was there's a lot of these things that are just like, holy shit.
100%. And your frame of reference for me was the Hornet. I had thousands, well over 2,000 hours on that jet. I mean, that was a jet that like, I knew that jet. It was like became part of like I strapped into that jet like it was part of my body. And so everything is in comparison. We get in the Viper the first time. Any variation on that is noticeable instantaneously. And a lot of it, certainly in the F-16, like the biggest variation from the Hornet to the Viper is it's much more powerful. And it's like, oh, and so if you get into a car that has significantly more horsepower, significantly better, speed, you can feel it right away. Yeah. And so each jet that I got into based on that frame of reference, which is a really nice frame of reference. The Hornet it's a really nice baseline, but things that were better in the other airplanes, you can feel right away. And things that are worse too, obviously, right? Yeah. But yes, you have that frame of reference. So these all have personalities, all different temperaments, and you could probably map to like what they are in the spectrum of supercar. They're all a little bit different.
Yeah. So I mean, I assume that the 22 and the 35 are the Ferrariest of them, or are they not?
So from a maneuvering and physical performance standpoint, the Raptor and F-35 the F-35 is nowhere near the Raptor. In fact, the F-35 from a performance standpoint flies very much in the Hornet Viper realm. Nothing like an F-22. On the inside, the F-35 is by far the best one.
Really?
By far the best one.
And what makes it the best?
So two things. The range of spectrums you can operate in. I mentioned this before. Most of the other airplanes, they just live in just somewhat a relatively narrow band of a single frequency to radio frequency. There's some active movements, there's some passive stuff, but you kind of live in this little spectrum. The F-35 operates in basically just generically out-of-band spectrum, so places where you're not used to operating. The Hornet and the Viper, you can strap an infrared pod onto those jets. You can put a laser onto those jets. The F-22 doesn't have any of those things. It's just pure fighter in a lot of ways. Not pure, but very much like a pure fighter. F-35 takes all these different spectrums, electro-optical, infrared, laser, RF, and the bandwidth of those is much wider. And you stack them on each other, and then you can interact with a bunch of other airplanes where that data is getting fused together. And so when you take the combination of the fusion of sensors and the range of sensors, it's like it's as if I could give you a set of eyes that could see, like animals see like different spectrums of stuff. Like, cats at night can see things that we human beings literally can't see, like literally see things you can't see, colors. And if I were to give you that, you're like, oh my God. Picture the movie Predator.
Yeah.
The dude that's like, he can see like, with your naked eye, you can't see the heat outline. All of a sudden, it's like that. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You can't see this? You're like, dude, what are you looking? I'm like, I can see this. I can see him. He's moving. And you're like, I don't see what you're talking about. It's like that. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, you're seeing things that other people don't even know they can't see because their eyes don't work like that.
Well, they've never seen them.
Kind of a crude example, but that's that Predator thing when like you're seeing the outline, you're like, holy crap, dude! You can see the guy, his heat signature, infrared signature, like, oh, that's him. Where the naked eye can't see that. It's kind of like that.
Well, so I mean, to me, that begs the question of. It doesn't seem like weight would necessarily be an issue. Why is that capability not retrofitted or put into every other aircraft?
Yeah, it's certainly part of it is they are absolutely trying to do that, and you are 100% retrofitting. There's a lot of backfilling of technology. The problem with that is, the frame of the airplane. One of the biggest advantages is that you have a low observable platform. To create a low observable platform, you have to do that from inception. Stealth by itself, it's super nice, but it is not by itself. The stealth is like a weapon system. It's really no different than your rifle, your heavy machine gun, a grenade, a light, depending on the environment, something to blast through a door. Like, it's a weapon system that is only optimized when integrated with all the other weapon systems that are on there. If you take that away, it really undermines the system, the whole of the system. If you took a really central piece of your warfighting capability and you took that away from you, it would be like saying like, hey, SEAL platoon, all the things, and like, hey, you don't have night vision goggles anymore. Like, dude, we gotta...
It's going to change.
It's going to change like, you can't just take that away from me. So it's a piece of the asset when built together that without that, it changed everything. So retrofitting certain capabilities and fortune platforms is great. It gives them really cool information, but you cannot recreate the whole of the platform that really exists with all these systems combined to create this single platform that has this capability built in. It has to be from the ground up. It has to be inherent. And then the disparity is like, it's night and day. It's night and day.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you remove the technology, the electronics packages from all of the airframes and base it solely on kind of the analog experience that flying is one of them the most fun to
the
fly.
F-16.
Really?
Without a doubt. The F-16, and talking just pure fighter, all my Viper bros are happy. They're cheering right now. The two thing about it is, one is like, it is the simplest. I mean, that jet is just, it is so... And I mean in a positive way, the simplicity of that airplane. It's obscenely overpowered, and it has the best view. It is like the Wonder Woman jet. Like, you're sitting in this bubble canopy, you're sitting above everything. If you look over you might see the very tip of the pitot tube. You look down, you're seeing the ground. You look behind you can see the tail. All these other jets have like canopy bows and high, canopy sills and like Lexes in the way. The Viper is like, it's like being in a glass tube. You can see in every direction, crystal clear. And so the view of the Viper and the simplicity and the power of that, if you're just talking just analog fighter, that's the plane to fly.
Yeah, that's
without
cool.
a doubt.
So I know you said it's impossible to pick So I think I figured out a way to make you pick one, is that if Uncle Sam calls you up tomorrow and says, Dave, we are so thankful for your service. We're going to give you one of the planes that you used to fly.
Yeah.
You can only pick one, and we're going to pay to service it, the fuel, whatever,
Yeah.
but you only get one. Which one are you going to have them gift you?
Raptor.
Raptor.
No question.
Yeah.
And my standard, I get asked, what's your favorite jet? I get asked on social media all the time, and I answer the same way every single time. I put 2 answers. I say, all of them, Raptor.
Yeah.
It's the F-22, man. There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
That's the plane.
That's awesome. All right, so you flew that airframe for 4 years. What happened next to now move on to the F-35?
So the whole point of the Raptor exchange for the Marine Corps, and people are like, why would the Marines send a guy to fly the F-22? We have no connection to that airplane, which is true, by the way. And that's why they've never done it since, is there's no real connection from the Marine Corps to the F-22, except at that period of time, the F-22 got introduced to the Air Force late 2005. And it was the first generational development in decades, like 30-something years, a generational change in platforms. And introducing an entire new platform, especially a 5th-gen stealth, sensor-fused, high-tech platform, is really hard. And you make all sorts of mistakes in introducing this platform. The Marine Corps was buying the F-35, which is going to be the first generational introduction of a platform in decades for the Marine Corps. Senior leadership in the Marine Corps had this idea, and I'm glad they did because it's a good idea, is send someone to go fly with the Air Force for 3 years and learn all the lessons of introducing a 5th-gen platform into an operational service. So I went to an operational test and evaluation squadron, the 422, to do operationally relevant flying. Part of it was to learn, like, why is 5th-gen so hard? Why is introducing this stuff so hard? What's going to be the impact of the fleet? All these things. And so the Marine Corps said, we have a limited opportunity to give one person some operational experience and expertise on what it's like to do that. Let's bring that person from that airplane to lead the introduction of our new platform. Some of it's just like the luckiest timing in the world. It was also built on our F-35s had gotten delayed, so we were behind schedule. There's all sorts of associations with that platform being a problem. There is no guarantee in the military, you know this as well as anyone, but my orders to fly the F-22 was the closest thing you could ever get to being guaranteed to going from the F-22 to the F-35.
Okay.
Based on the timing, the circumstance, and all the things, and it happened exactly as I dreamed.
Yeah.
And I went from the F-22, I left the F-22 squadron, PCS from Nellis in Vegas to Echelon in Florida, Air Force Base, by the way, just randomly. The Marines were flying on Air Force Base. There was a CO before me who had been there for 2 years, never saw an airplane because the program was 2 years delayed. The day after I show up, the first F-35, like, it's a good friend of mine, Bahaz's call sign, great dude, and he's gone. He's had an incredible career, he's flown the airplane. But I showed up and we high-fived. He left. I got there, and the F-35 arrived.
Man. Is it an accurate assumption that because of your time in the F-22, it was easier for you to jump in the F-35?
100%. Those two airplanes are very, very similar. The crazy thing about that is that as a Marine, I was the only pilot in the world for like 5 years to be dual qualified on the F-35 and F-22. Wow. Crazy.
Man.
Totally crazy.
What makes a 5th-gen plane, what's the difference between 4th and 5th, other than one generation, because that's the smart.
Yeah, it's all those things I talked about. I think the two biggest differentiators, and there's more, there's plenty more, and you could straight up Google it. There's like some sort of doctrinal thing. The two biggest things are, one is the stealth component, and that's not just invisible. It's the ability to manage your signature and also anything that emits. The stealth attribute built in, we talked about how it's got to be built into that, is one major component. And the second one is the fused range of information. So sensor fusion is a remarkable technological development. It used to be that, like, and you could see this kind of in an analog world if we're operating together. I could be like, hey, Mike, let me tell you what I see. I see, a building, and I see this, and you might be, 2 blocks away, and you go, okay, let me tell you what I see. We could kind of figure out, like, working together, we kind of paint a picture. Sensor fusion takes everything I see, takes everything you see, combines it together, and then shares that with each other as if it's a single picture. So I'm not translating your version of what you're seeing. You're not translating what I'm seeing. Behind the glass of the jet, it's taking all your sensor perspective, all the things that your airplane sees, by the way, in every frequency and every spectrum and every direction, fuses it. And so what's being presented to me in sometimes is information my jet doesn't even know. It's all coming from all the other platforms that are out there. But what I get is a fused image of, and image is a loose term, but image of the world based on that shared information with no translation happening. Because I might go, hey, I'm seeing a 2-story building. It's got like a little foyer thing and a little glass thing. And you have to like in your brain try to like picture what I'm picturing. You know the old thing like, okay, I'm going to say what I'm saying, draw it. And you hold up the picture, I'm like, it's kind of close. Sensor fusion does all that, the technology. So when you see it, we are seeing a fused image of the world from all the contributors. So you can, the magnification of that is hard to overstate how significant that is. Those are two major differences between 4th and 5th gen.
What would 6th generation look like?
So you're gonna, I think a couple things. I think you're gonna see a massive increase in the capability to do this. So we pioneered that capability. Now you're gonna get to a place where our ability to do that is gonna be significantly better. So think about like pipe band throughput, how much information you could transmit back and forth. 6th generation is gonna open up a pipe. Think about like, computers development, like your iPhone to, your laptop 20 years ago. I guess in some ways it's kind of the same, but you can imagine like the capacity of information is going to be drastically different. So all of a sudden the range of things that you can share with one another is very, very different. The speed and the information and the amount of information is going to be significantly better. I think you're also going to get, some components of, and I'll just keep it generic. I don't want to get out of my lane. And there's going to be a networking component. I think part of what makes 5th gen so robust, and I think what you're going to see is magnified significantly with 6th gen, is the ability to be a contributor to the broad networking of shared information and users and the ability to use that information relevantly. We're kind of still pretty narrow there. It's really helpful for the things that I see for you to understand and vice versa. And I would just use the term networking, if that makes sense, to be able to do that, and collectivizing that information. When you take all the different nodes of space, sea, air, land, subsurface, space, and fuse that in a way that paints this common picture that can be really usable in a tactical sense, the bigger and more robust that is, the better.
I gotcha. Would it be logical for there to be an AI component built in where there's like an AI autopilot?
I would say 100% contribute. The artificial intelligence component of that, the more robust it is, the better.
I mean, I guess you could argue autopilot is kind of in essence an AI 1.0 or a beta AI version almost, wouldn't it? I mean,
yeah, and I think I totally get what you're saying, and I think that component of the making things automatic is the fusing of the information.
Yeah.
The flying is kind of like the last thing to have to really think about. It's the fusing of the information. I think when you think about like autopilot and just basic pilot relief, like, hey, I can do this. You don't need to be doing this. Don't waste any brain power on this. That's that fusion of information that's happening. The more that relief you give the pilot, the more bandwidth it opens up for him to other things.
Yeah. You mentioned that China and Russia have Gen 5 aircraft. Is there a way for us to know legitimately that you know what I'm going to ask?
I do. Yeah, I don't want to hate to get ahead of your question because your questions are awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. Is there a way for us to know if any of their pilots are as good as ours or even close?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have really robust, really effective assessment tools, but I don't think we really know. That said, I'll say this with supreme confidence that the way we train our pilots to operate, we know the methodology is superior and creates a better pilot. That said, that's a methodology, which means the more that can be replicated, the more that can get leveled and be on parity. But I think even the best assessment tools will tell you, like, this is what we think. And I've never been in a situation where when we finally discover the truth, that it matched our assessment. There's always a gap in there somewhere.
Yeah.
We always go, oh, I didn't know they could do that. Or, oh, we overestimated that. It's never exactly right.
Yeah. In both ways.
In both ways.
Yeah. One of the questions we've talked a little bit about AI, but to me, from a targeting standpoint, when that technology gets buffered into fighter jets, I guess, to me, the big question is the allowing the autonomy to target without human authorization. Like, you've been in positions where maybe if 5 years from now you were in some of the positions you've been in as a CO, you would be making that call as to whether or not you would allow that. Is there a scenario that exists where you would allow the targeting of, human beings' lives being taken without a human being giving the go criteria? And the one example I would use is, especially for close air support, where it's an ambush type thing, where milliseconds matter, and the check and balance of saying, no, I want a human being to sign off on this, could be the difference between a group on the ground being ambushed or not by not allowing it.
Dude, that's a brutal question. Everything in my gut tells me that I should say no, because I have this strong sense when you, and I was leaning in a different direction when you said close air support. The word, when you say the word close air support, the word that pops into my head is detailed integration. You're on the ground, I'm in the air. We have to be talking. But I think the real debate in there is it relies on, I think it's an over-reliance on my human ability to decipher what's going on. And I place this outsized confidence on myself. I was a FAC. Like, I know what I'm doing here. I know how to do all these things. And I think because close air support has this reliance on detailed integration, collateral damage is a huge, huge concern. Blue on blue is a huge, huge concern. Coordination of fires, huge concern. There's this human component to that, which relies heavily on the FAC, and by the way, obviously the pilot as well and the ground force commander, that we, I think, operate with the assumption that that's the ultimate mitigator, and I think that undervalues the the reality that AI is so much smarter. If you were to say, like, a kill box, the cool thing about a kill box is it doesn't require any collaboration. Go to this kill box. If you operate inside these 4 lines, kill anything that moves, kind of thing. That's like a dream, right? Like, no collaboration, no coordination, no friendlies are there. It's not fail safe. We know mistakes happen, but ultimately, like, with well-coordinated stuff, like, kill boxes are great. Just go run around, do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's essentially a South Texas helo hog hunt.
Go nuts, right? Yeah. There's nobody going to be down there, kind of thing. Go nuts. I'm deferring, back to the CAS piece. I do not think we are at a place where we can comfortably admit the truth that the AI process is probably like a self-driving car. There's a piece of it's like, no, it'll just be better if I do it myself. It's kind of like autopilot of the ship. I just am more comfortable doing it myself. I don't think that's accurate.
Yeah.
I think it's hard, and I'm bouncing all over the place with this answer because it's a hard question. But 2001, 25 years ago, we had something in the Hornet called a Mode 1. A Mode 1 is a hands-off landing to the ship. You could couple up your auto throttles with a ring finger. I'm doing this. And you could couple up the jet to a beacon that the ship emitted, that a little radar antenna on the F-18, and you could literally fly it hands off, and it would fly you into touchdown. And everybody hated it but me. They hated it.
Really?
I loved it. In fact, I did like 25 Mode 1s in a row at some point in the height of Afghanistan until the LSOs were like, hey, you got to fly a manual approach. I'm like, why? It's like, well, we just think you should. I'm like, well, the book says I'm legal, like, as long as every 7 days.
I need to know you can still do it.
There's validity to that, right? But I was like, how about the computer in the F-18 doing corrections 50 times faster than I could? The problem was that there's every now and then the jet would kick you out or make a little mistake and put you in a potentially catastrophic scenario. So you had to fly it like you were kind of hands-on the whole time, but you're ready to take over. I think there's a human compulsion to the control of that is really hard to get over. It's really hard to overcome. Self-driving cars, that kind of thing. Hey, what do you think of self-driving? Cool. Sit in the passenger seat. Sit in the rear seat. People have no. I talked about it earlier, like commercial airplanes.
Yeah.
Hey, would you be comfortable with two computer, AI flying your 757? No. But like compared to human error, it's probably 100 times safer. But it's not the fail-safe, I think, piece, and there's a human component that I think prevents us from being willing to do that. Yeah. And I think that's the debate forever, right? It's like, do we relinquish that control when objectively it's probably a lot smarter and faster than us, but there's a component of the failure that the human beings can mitigate that we don't want to relinquish.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the happy medium is twofold. One, in the question I asked is that it has to, it's like a pre-mission authorization. It's a case-by-case basis. Hey, on this mission, like we're anticipating that happening with a higher level of, or a higher
likelihood.
A higher level of likelihood for that to happen. So as the ground force commander, I'm going to, for this mission, authorize autonomous AI intervention. If it goes wrong, it's still your fault as the human who authorized it.
Yep.
So it's going to be that guy's, hey, am I willing to put my reputation and potential UCMJ shit kicking on the shoulders of a machine or not?
Yeah.
I think in the passenger plane scenario, I think where the hesitation stems from, if you kind of plinko game it down to its root cause, is if something does go wrong, there's, I think, an inherent assumption that it's going to continue to go wrong, whereas a human being can say, I need to do this to fix it. Yeah. It's like once a mistake is made, is that, okay, well, if AI made that mistake, they're going to continue to make that mistake.
It doesn't know me. Yeah.
I think that's where the hesitation comes from.
Yeah,
but
that is such a cool, I'm thinking of like being in a cockpit watching that happen. Is that as the error is made, it's going to cascade because it doesn't understand that the error was made. Whereas I'm going to go, whoa. Yeah. Which is why I think, like I said, that commercial scenario, like there's always going to be some up there, right? Like there's always going to be a person up there, right?
Yeah.
Even with this autopilot getting to a place where it's almost totally automated.
Yeah.
And I think that scenario is the difference. And that pre-authorization thing is an interesting way to think about it too, because it allows you to almost contribute to the inputs that allow for that to occur.
Yeah.
Is you have some control over that.
Yeah, it allows you to take advantage of it without completely relinquishing all authority. But
yeah.
All right, so going from the F-22 to the F-35, fairly seamless transition. You mentioned kind of why it took place. How long did you fly that, and what was your experience like? And was that the last part of your career?
Yeah, it was the last flying part of my career. Flew it for almost 3 years. Much easier transition from Raptor to F-35. So I'd already gone through the pain of the fifth gen transition. I got to watch it on all the students and all my squadron mates.
Yeah, because it's not that hard. Just do this.
Come on, guys. I loved it. I loved it. It was at its infancy, so relatively immature systems, a lot of growing pains, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of challenges in doing that. But I had a ton of autonomy. I felt I had a ton of freedom, a ton of control over a major inflection point for TAC Air, for certainly the Marine Corps and all the services. I really, really liked flying that plane. I really liked it.
Yeah. So going into the F-35, that was kind of the last part of your flying career. Did you do any combat deployments with that, and or what was the kind of the beginning of the end in terms of deciding to now retire and finally get out and separate?
Yeah, which actually eventually happened.
Yeah.
Even though I promised it was going to happen several times before. So the F-35, I stood up the first Marine Corps squadron, was a training squadron. It was the only squadron in the world flying the F-35B. So I was in Echelon Air Force Base in the Panhandle, in Florida. It was just crazy. It's like, 7 years non-deploying, flying fifth-gen fighters, not a complaint in the world. Just the funnest time you could imagine. Started a family, had kids. But in my mind, like there was definitely a part where I still had long-term thoughts about the Marine Corps and knew that there was definitely, when I was leaving the F-35 the first time in 2014, I was going off I got selected for, it's called TLS, top level school. So school for post squadron commanders. I got picked up for a fellowship. There's Marine Corps has one fellowship where you can get a master's degree, and I got this thing at Johns Hopkins, a policy degree. So I had this thought like, hey, I'm definitely going to stick around, I think. I went to school for a year, which was awesome, loved it, and then I got a job at the Pentagon. And I was really getting exposed to, some higher level strategic stuff, some interesting stuff. And, Pentagon's the Pentagon, but there's a lot of cool stuff going on in that building. And I got to see some pretty neat stuff and got to get involved in like innovation and some neat stuff. And I had gotten selected for colonel, and I'd gotten selected for command as an 06. And I was going to go back to command in the F-35. I was going to go back to the F-35 a second time. And I was like a year into my tour at the Pentagon, so 2 years out of the cockpit. I was a couple months away from promoting to colonel, which takes a 3-year obligation with it, and go back to now Beaufort to fly the F-35. And I just had this sense that I had lost an intangible piece of flying that I thought was really important. Flying should not feel routine. Flying should feel at a bare minimum like exciting and intriguing, and I was having this sense of going back to training and requalifying in the airplane, and like I had a little sense of dread, like, oh man, I gotta like open up the book again, and it was subtle. It wasn't this big, it was a subtle little nagging thing in my head, and I was also going to go back to a training command, and I didn't want to do that. I had already done that. I had asked to go to the operational squadrons had stood up in the 2 years that I left Eglin. They were starting, combat squadrons were standing up, and the F-35 was starting to grow into itself. And there was just a part of me that was like, I felt for the first time, I don't want to do this. Little voice. That compounded with picturing like 2 years, I don't ever want to walk out to an F-35 thinking, I don't really want to go do this. And same thing, I talked to my wife, who's always been like, hey, whatever you think is best. We talked about it for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, I can tell. I just knew. And so I just decided on one day, I will never forget it. I declined command, declined promotion, and submitted for retirement. Wow. 3 different chains of command, by the way,
yeah.
all on the same day. And just.
Were they pissed that you did that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Like not disappointed, actually pissed.
Well, literally 3 different commands. One was like headquarters, one was manpower, one was my senior general, and my command happened to be the Pentagon. The general that I reported to was awesome. Called into his office and thanked me for 23 years of service. He was awesome. The manpower that were responsible for me going to command another F-35, and he was disappointed. Like, dude, you're killing us here. Another guy, and I'll just keep it simple, another guy was pissed at me.
Yeah.
Pissed.
Is that something where there's any recourse on their end or anything they can do about it?
They probably could have been vindictive if they wanted to be, because I had a whole year. This is probably August or September of 16. I was going to hit terminal in April of 17, so 9 months, something like that. They probably could have found a really bad deal for me. Nobody did that. It came, And by the way, another lesson I learned is like the significance of Dave Berke on the Marine Corps was pretty small.
Well, thinking about it, I mean, other than the initial assignment to the F-18 squadron initially, was every other position that you took a one of one?
Pretty much. Very unique. Yes.
Like that's never happened.
It just doesn't happen. And you said it well. Like, I simply cannot take credit for that. I cannot say like, oh, I did this and that's what I can't do that.
Well, you could.
Yeah, I could. I'm not going to for obvious reasons. And it just happened that way.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. So once you decided to pull the trigger on that, how did the reconnection with Jocko and Leif and kind of transitioning into what you're doing now, and also, I've had so many guys sitting in that chair that that transition is even compared to everything that they've been through, is the hardest thing they've ever had to go through. Did you experience that same thing?
No.
It was seamless right into.
Just again, like. If I have any friends left, they're going to hate me at this point, because that was the easiest thing in the world. And it's linked to the previous question you just asked. So I mentioned I got that fellowship at Johns Hopkins, and So I'm basically a civilian for a year, and I'm going to school in, like shorts and a t-shirt, and I'm getting this master's from these brilliant professors, Elliott Cohen, Johns Hopkins at School of Advanced International. So this is cool. It's the coolest thing ever. This is 2014 to 2015. That's the time frame Leif and Jocko wrote the book Extreme Ownership. And in 2015, I'm in DC finishing up my first year of my master's at Johns Hopkins, and they're doing a book launch. Leif had seen me. We'd stayed in touch here and there, but not really connected. I had not talked to Jocko since he threw a party at his house after Ramadi. I had not seen him in 10 years. Not talked to him and seen him in 10 years. Leif had stayed in touch. When I was the CEO of the F-35 Squadron the previous year, I'd done a big interview on 60 Minutes. I told you the program was behind schedule. There was a lot of controversy. I became kind of the voice box for the program because I was the CEO. And so I had some prominent media things that Leif had seen. His wife was in media, and he had always stayed in touch. He's like, hey, I saw you in 60 Minutes. And we just stayed in touch, just randomly. He invited me to a book launch event at a place where I had a fellowship in DC, and I had seen him in 10 years, and he was talking about extreme ownership. I'm like, man, this was really cool. Like, and by the way, like a lot of the stories they wrote about, I'm with them on these missions. I'm like, oh, we were there together. So we had this kind of neat reunion. This is 2015. The day I just described, promotion, command, and retirement, that day, I submit for that. I get on the bus out of the Pentagon to drive me back down to the parking lot where my car is by my house. Leif Babin calls me as I'm on the bus. So I had put in to leave the Marine Corps with no plan, zero plans. He calls me and he's like, hey, dude, haven't talked in a little while, but he had kind of hinted that the book was doing well and the company was growing a little bit. And he's like, man, if you ever thought about joining us, Jocko and I would love to have you, kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's funny you called, Leif.
Because I got nothing going.
Because about 3 hours ago, I'm telling you, man, it happened that day. And so that led to a discussion where he and I talked a couple of times all over the phone. And he talked about what they were doing. He and Jocko were doing a gig in like the Salamander Inn in Virginia. He's like, come to this event. It was like November. I go to that thing. I watch them do a full day training with this client. And I'm like, holy cow, this is awesome. And first of all, I knew it was Leif and Jocko. I knew these guys from 10 years. These are legitimate. These are awesome human beings, not just great SEALs and great warriors. These are good human beings. So I had the trust factor was off the charts high. I trusted them. And then when I got to see it firsthand, I'm like, this is unreal. And Leif calls me. He's like, hey, what do you think? And we basically did a handshake deal over the phone. Like, I'll join Echelon Front. In January, I started going to events. April, I'm on terminal leave. And by June of 2017, I'm at the company. And it's been 8.5 years later, almost 9 years later. I had the easiest, most seamless, most ridiculous transition in the history of military retirement.
And it was the day that you dropped your paperwork.
That day.
Can you do me a favor after this interview? I'll drive you to the nearest gas station.
Get some
buy
tickets.
a fucking lottery ticket.
I know, dude. It's crazy.
That's absurd.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that never happens. I will say, similarly, it was not easy or even seamless, but it was very understood for me, like my next thing. There was never any ambiguity or unsuredness as to what I wanted to do and the path I wanted to take. So I never experienced a lot of that kind of floating around in a rowboat feeling that a lot of guys, really struggle with. But
I think the biggest challenge is not what you do, but finding the meaning in what you're doing.
100%.
And the thing about Echelon, when I joined Echelon Front, it was Leif and Jocko. They were running around. It was just the very beginning. It's 9 years later. Like, our company is huge. It's everywhere now. But what's been universal, not just the amazing growth of the company and being on the ground floor of that, is that from the beginning, I believed in what we were doing because I knew what we were doing was helping people. And I would imagine that's the similarity that we have was that's never been the debate. And I've seen veterans, good friends, and one of the things you can imagine too, a lot of pilots go fly for the airlines.
Yeah.
It's a natural transition. But one of the things some guys, no judgment, but some guys struggle with is they don't have the same intangible belief in what they're doing. And so to me, it isn't what you do, it's do you believe that in the impact of what you're doing? And you've got that. I mean, nobody can outmatch you in like, are you making an impact? Are you creating value? Are you doing things that matter and important? If the answer is yes, it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that. What I would say, after doing this for almost 8 years and seeing some guys who struggle with that more than anything they've struggled with in their life, and some of these guys have childhoods that you couldn't even put in a movie. They're so terrible, and some guys don't struggle at all. And there's always one very defining parallel between the guys who do struggle with it and the guys who don't, and that is purpose. Is that it's not the traumatic experiences that people go through that prevent them from going down that rabbit hole of despair, because there are guys who go through it, and there's lots of guys who go through it, and some guys struggle with it, some guys don't. The guys that struggle with it don't have that why. The guys who don't have that why. That's the only constant that I see every single time. And so to me, the resilience factor in the human experience, tells you that the oldest question known to mankind, what's the meaning of life? It's purpose. It's really that simple. And as long as whatever it is, because I agree 100%, it doesn't matter. I don't care if it's, basket weaving or, whatever it is. If it's something that when you wake up in the morning and you're excited to go do it and you feel like it matters, doesn't matter what you've been through. Like you'll forget it. And you'll deal with it. You'll work through it.
100%.
I'm going to give you a question from the office space, the Bobs, the efficiency experts. Chief Development Officer, what would you say you do here?
Yeah.
What is that?
You mean what's the made-up name?
Yeah. Is that just a fancy business card title?
Well, kind of. In all seriousness, and this has been the best part about what Leif and Jocko created at Echelon Front, and what we're doing is, like I said, it was the two of them. And Jamie Cochran, who is now our chief operating officer, was like the part-time person who booked their flights. So it was two people in a 10-hour a week, secretary. We are a full-blown, like, legitimate leadership consultancy. And what we had to develop, and this is literally where the title came from, was we had to develop a curriculum by which how we taught the content that Leif and Jocko created in the book. So Extreme Ownership is the book that really is the foundation of all of this. And it's awesome. And it's well organized. And it's got the laws of combat. It's got all these things. But teaching is different. And so I had this background at Topgun where we did a lot of instruction, probably very similar to TradeEt, a lot of teaching. And so Jocko's like, hey, you need to take the curriculum that they had, they understood what they were doing, and develop the methodology to both teach our instructors that come onto the company to teach and how we deliver it to our clients. And so that's what the development is. It's helping develop how the company has grown. So in one sense, it's just like some buzzy business term, but the development piece, which has been the most fun for me, obviously we take a ton of meaning in interacting with our clients, but I've gotten to help create what the company has become and develop how we teach this content, which is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine the hurdle or the challenge of taking very clear-cut understanding from a combat operational standpoint, lessons learned, and applying that and evolving it into a business mindset and strategy. What is the biggest hurdle and trick to actually making that happen?
Yeah, the hurdle is to dispel the myth that somehow combat is different. Now, listen, I know the setting is different. I don't mean from an environment standpoint. I mean from the actions and behaviors that you took to be successful in combat. They're the exact same ones that fit everywhere. And I think one of the challenges we've always had to deal with at Echelon Front, especially when you look at people like Jocko, you think like, oh, I have nothing in common. I can't relate to this person or what he's done.
Do that.
Yeah, it's exactly. Oh, these are SEALs. But you know this as well as anyone. The things that make a good SEAL are the same things that make a good anything. And by the way, the things that make a bad SEAL, bad pilot, it's all the same things. Your ego, you don't listen, you're combative, you're not a good teammate, you don't communicate well, you don't empower your people to, all the stuff. And so when we can dispel and peel away the preconceived notion that it's different for the military and go, no. They're regular human beings. They're regular, normal people. Now, they've gone through this incredible training. These are things they've learned. But the things they do to be successful in these environments, when we can make the linkage between the tools, behaviors, the attributes, the mindsets to success in the military is the same in business and in life, then the light bulb comes on. They go, oh my gosh, that lesson applies to me. Extreme ownership doesn't have to be about a blue on blue or a Marine in combat. It could be about, I'm not taking the trash out or putting gas in my car. Yes, it's the same thing. And then when people make that linkage, all of a sudden these combat lessons learned have impact and meaning to everybody in every aspect of life. And there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah.
That's the magic, is that it's not magic at all. It's regular normal life. Unfortunately, we in the military, there's a myth to dispel, like, oh, it's different because the setting and the environment and the people look different. But you know this.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff.
Yeah. In those early days, were there ever any? Did you ever stumble with being able to make that happen? Were there ever times where you're like, man, they're just not getting it? Like, we need to reframe how we're explaining this.
We have 100%. There is I don't say like a light switch moment where we just stopped doing this and started doing that. There's an arc of this evolution, but one of the things that I certainly learned is I used to lean much more heavily on the history of the military experience. And so I'd had these longer stories about Ramadi, these longer stories about these lessons. And I've been able to condense those down to some key elements and spend more time talking about what's going on in their life and then pull in an example from the military that becomes more relatable rather than starting with it. Because, I learned this too, like telling combat stories is hard to relate to. Yeah. And if I start with those stories, it becomes a little bit of a storytelling. I'm going to tell you a story about when I did this and this firefighter on this plane or in this carrier, which is different than when you talk to me about some of the challenges you're having. My people aren't listening to me, or this department's not pulling their own weight. And you go, yeah, I have been there. That's frustrating. I saw this here, little story about the military anecdote. I've seen this in my home life with my family. And then all of a sudden, you're spending much less time leading with those military stories and much more time relating to what they're dealing with and using those a little bit of a backdrop to be more relatable and something that isn't very relatable. And so we have 100% evolved significantly over time. If you were to take what Dave Berke was saying, a lot of what we're saying is the same. How he said it 8 years ago to now is definitely different.
So more vignette style where that reminds me of a time when, instead of kind of ramming it down your throat.
Yeah, and I'll be careful when I say this, but like nobody wants to hear you tell stories all day. You tell a story, it's cool, but like that's not how you teach in life.
Yeah, that's not why you're here.
It's not why you're here. Yeah, it has to be relatable to you, and the way it becomes relatable to you is you have to be the one doing the talking, telling me what's going on in your life, and go, oh, Mike, I think what you're saying is this. That kind of reminds me of this. Here's how we use these lessons to apply to you. And you go, oh, dang, I can do that. Yes, this applies to you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's so cool, man.
Have there been, and I'm not asking you to shit on them, but like problem clients or ones where you come in and you're like, man, this just isn't a good fit. Like there's a lot of resistance, or they have a shitty attitude, or they're just not willing to.
I don't want this to be a canned answer. I really don't. When I say like, not really. Now, we have started with clients where a lot of the folks are really resistant, they're leery, and they're very skeptical. And part of the reason they're skeptical, and I'll say this, is like, look at Jocko's face. Yeah. This guy, or like we come in our black polos, the Marines and the SEALs are coming in, and a little bit on the facade, the front facing, you can go, this dude? Yeah. And so we have definitely worked with clients where there's skepticism. And a lot of times, too, what adds to that skepticism is there'll be a guy at the company's like all fired up, and he's always talking extreme ownership, and he's talking the SEALs, and people are like, easy, Mike, like dial it back. And so you're almost kind of forcing it on them. And so there are definitely times, even to this day, where we come in and like, oh, what are these guys all about? The beautiful thing is, and I mean this, every industry that you can imagine, the whole range, tech companies, construction companies, healthcare, education, name it. And every layer of leadership, founders, CEOs, frontline individual contributors, when you get past that initial skepticism and help them see the foundational basic things that we teach, build good relationships, be a good communicator, work on things that matter, empower your people, make sure the team wins. We have found unbelievably good success, even with the ones that are thinking like, oh, who are these guys? Yeah. What's this guy gonna, what is this guy gonna yell at me like a drill instructor? And so there is a little bit of that. We have found a lot of good success in working through that quickly because we aren't telling combat stories and lecturing people. We're listening to them, hearing what their problems are, and helping them relate it to the things we teach and make it applicable and relevant to them.
Yeah. In the instances where you have encountered, significant resistance up front, has there been a go-to kind of hack or method to break that wall down?
Totally.
Yeah.
Listen to what they have to say.
Yeah.
Hey, what's on your mind? And some of them will be very comfortable telling you what they're concerned about. And you listen to them and go, those are all really good points. And just by the act of listening to them and saying these are good points, you immediately lower their defenses. Yeah. Because what they're thinking is like, hey, let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
You don't know the first thing about what I like. That's kind of what they're thinking is the Marine's going to come in or the SEAL's going to come in. And the hack is you go, oh, hey.
Yeah, you're right.
Listen, what's on your, yeah, that's right. No, those are fair points. And I'm glad you brought that up. I want to make it, and you have a conversation with them like a normal human being. And they go, oh, that guy's Dave. It's like, and that's probably the biggest myth about Jocko and I know he's been like, talking to Jocko, he's just a normal person.
Yeah.
He's just a regular person. Leif and Jocko are just regular people. Jocko does not look like a normal person. He's not made to look like a normal person. Yeah. But even when you get past that initial image of Jocko, you're like, oh, this is he's a human being, a regular human being. Yeah. That is the quote hack, which is you can listen to him, build a relationship, and relate to them like a normal person.
Yeah, that's awesome. With the size of the company of where it's gotten to, I don't know if it's something maybe you don't want to share, but about how many events and seminars, things do you guys put on a year?
Dude, we're almost 50 employees. We're 17 instructors. We are doing thousands of interactions a year. We're probably doing 60 to 70 training events per month.
Wow.
For the instructors. And then you've got the musters, the in-person 3-day conference. You've got battlefield tours. You've got this virtual platform where we're doing once a week. I know it sounds like an advertisement. We're doing thousands of interactions across the whole spectrum.
Wow. Are the kind of programs or seminars that like the musters, is that, I don't want to say boilerplate, but like, is it kind of, here's our system and then you kind of tweak it to this client, or is it very customized?
It varies. Like a muster is very foundational. We essentially manage the flow of the 2 days. Now that's evolved. It's changed, but we have essentially a sequence which is designed to go as deep as we can to identify all the foundational things we teach. And in the 2 days, we're going to get to all of them. With a client, there's a customization component to it, but it's not like freewheeling. We have a framework, and the framework is built around the foundational principles, the mindsets, and the actions. And so you don't have like an unlimited number of things to talk about, but you don't want to walk in and be like, hey, I know what your problems are. Here's the answer. It's not a template. I don't just put it in your lap and have you execute it. I have to understand what's going on. And I think the classic dichotomy that we deal with is, in one hand, everything's the same, dude. Everything is the same. Everybody's dealing with all the same problems. And there's comfort in that. You can tell my wife and my kids and my friend, it's all the same stuff. My business. And in the exact same breath, the dichotomy is everybody is unique and every situation is different. And I think what the happy medium inside there is we have a framework. These are the foundational things we have to get to. This is kind of the sequence we want to at least start with. But the more we understand what's going through, then I go, oh, hey, it sounds like we maybe want to focus here, and we'll customize and tailor that. And the whole point is that it should be you guys doing it, your company, not us bringing it to you. The minute we start prescribing and slapping answers on your desk and telling you to just follow these protocols blindly, you have a problem, because it doesn't address the uniqueness and the nuance of that. Yeah. That said, we also want people to know too, like, I know you're unique, I know you're different, but it is all the same stuff. That company, that department, and that's why healthcare and insurance and education and construction and tech, the reason we can relate to all of them is like it's all the same stuff.
Yeah.
When you get down to it, it's all the same. Same stuff we had in the military, same stuff. Yeah. So we're always trying to strike that right balance. Customization is probably a little bit too broad of a word, but it's absolutely inherently designed to be flexible. You got a company coming in just telling you they know the answer, just slap it on your desk, say just do this. They're missing a major portion of understanding what's going on in your world.
Yeah. It again reminds me of jiu-jitsu in that there are some physics-like constants, principle-wise,
Perfect
that
example.
are always there and that you have to live by. But, each person's approach to it may be a little different. Who you're going against is going to be a little different. It's amazing how
It's
many,
a perfect example.
how many times it gets woven into life. But are there ever times where the leadership at Echelon Front ever disagrees on how to handle something or whatever? And how do you guys navigate that when you guys don't agree on something?
Yeah. And it's interesting. Disagree is probably a little strong of a word. And I'm not trying to be all like,
Kid glove.
Yeah. We have the best part about, I think, what we do is at the very top, we have an alignment, an understanding of what we're trying to do. And I think the question sits typically inside the nuance and how you do it. If you're not careful, we have like an executive leadership team. It's Leif, Jocko, it's Jamie, me, and JP Donnell, the 5 of us. In a lot of ways, we really set kind of the framework for how the company operates, setting some very high level things like this is how we treat our clients. These are things that are priorities to us. We respond quickly. We answer foundational things. When you get down to the tactics of it, that's where some of the disagreement is. The tactic that we typically use when I go, I can see like Leif and I don't agree on what we should do here is doing exactly what we teach. It was like, all right, dude, Leif or Mike, hey, I'm thinking the exact opposite. What's on your mind? And you go, I'm thinking A, B, and C. And I'm like, oh, okay. But 90% of the problems evaporate by just being going, tell me what you're thinking and why you disagree. And I think we've also learned to like put into practice what we teach, which is if you disagree with someone who wants the same outcome, because we are aligned on the same outcome, you just accept that you're probably missing something. And so we definitely have disagreements on certain approaches in doing things, and just about every one of those gets resolved by doing what we teach.
Yeah. Is there ever a time where we just can't come to terms and you got to bump it up the chain? Like, is there a final, Jocko has the final say kind of thing? Or
I have been there almost 9 years. That has literally never once happened.
Yeah.
Now, we get questions about, and we'll say like, hey, Jocko, you might need to be the one that answers this. It'd be a question of like, hey, we want Jocko to do something, and he might be the ultimate decider on things that applies to him and his time and what he's doing. But I can't think of a single scenario where I didn't have the latitude to make a decision at my level. That said, I am, and it took me a while because the dude's scary, totally comfortable calling him and asking him, hey, what do you think?
Yeah. Is there a real world example that you could give where that happened, like what it actually was?
We had a company in an industry where we didn't really agree with what the product they were selling. You might be a user of that product.
What do you mean? You may have just taken a sip of that.
No, not the drink. Yeah.
Oh, I got you. It may be packed in your lip right
maybe. And we had to have a conversation like, hey, do we want to be supporting an industry that we consider maybe is not something we can get behind?
Yeah.
And by the way, like, we'll work with just about anybody. We'll work with anybody because what's common is that they're all human beings, and human beings are human beings. And for the most part, most human beings are just trying to do the right thing. We can work with just about anybody.
Yeah.
We had one where like, hey, we're not sure this is the best thing for us to be doing, and we decided not to.
Yeah, yeah. And was that something where ultimately it's like, hey, this is your brand.
100%.
Yeah.
And if I think like I can count on one finger in my mind, if I'm missing one, I can't think of another one in almost 9 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Was there any part of you that wanted to title the book, I have the need to lead? Did that ever cross your mind?
I hate you, man. There's so much history on the title that even hearing you say that is like makes me cringe. But yeah,
it almost was called that.
It almost.
Yeah, almost.
So bad.
What was the drive? Like where did the
fair
idea
question?
come from?
So the idea, believe it or not, the 2 other people that I was shared manuscript. It's like a working title. I forgot. I don't even know I don't think I had a title. Randomly, 2 people had the same idea, unsolicited. And they both mentioned it within like a week of each other. I'm like, that's kind of super weird. And the obvious part was the not to pop culture reference. I'm a Top Gun instructor. Everybody makes fun of me for Top Gun. Believe me, at Echelon Front, like I take all sorts of grief for Top Gun.
There's
Leif,
worse things to take grief for.
There is. Leif's a professional at sending the high five Top Gun memes. But the other side of that was, as I was writing the book, I kept saying a version of this phrase over and over again, which was, okay, in this situation, what you need to do is you need to lead your way through this. You need leadership. And the words need and lead kept unwittingly, like not by design, but as I was talking about the way to solve this particular problem, the answer was you need to lead, or a permutation of that. And at some point I'm like, holy cow, like that's really what I'm saying. You literally need to lead your way through this. And the hurdle was overcoming like the obvious pop culture reference.
Yeah.
And at first, Jocko was like, bro.
You can't do this.
And I wrote a little, and it's in the very beginning of the book, like why I literally addressed it because there was and most people think it's hilarious, but there's a point to it. The genuine aspect was I went back, I'm like, I say some version of you need to lead 1,000 times in this book. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? That's what we're doing because cool. I'm a Top Gun guy. We're gonna reference Top Gun, no question about it. But the truth is that is actually the answer to your problems is you need to lead.
Yeah. I mean, to me, with your background, like cringe aside, I think you have to.
You have to.
It's like
you got to embrace that stuff, man.
Absolutely.
You got to own that shit.
Yeah. If you were to ask ChatGPT to summarize your book in a paragraph, what would it be?
Oh God, it would have a ton of references to your ego is a problem. You're going to learn more from your mistakes than you will from your successes. And there's a specific way of thinking and acting to be successful in every aspect of life. That's what it would say.
Yeah.
And there's there's 1,000 examples of it. But if you want a summary dude, your ego is an issue. Yeah. And it's going to be forever.
Yeah. I mean, with that, I agree 100%. What exceptions or I guess kind of concessions would you make where ego can be a good thing in terms of being competitive and driven? Like where do you draw that line of keeping it in check but also using it to your advantage?
It's a perfect question. It is the absolute perfect question to ask because there's a little thing I use an example of where ego is good. And I have a chapter on humility, which is the exact same topic, but not the same version of what Leif and Jocko wrote in their book, because I wasn't going to just be repetitive, but there's a topic of this concept of humility, which is you have to strike the right balance on ego. And if at 2:00 in the morning after a 7-hour mission in Afghanistan, behind the ship with some mechanical problems and bad weather, do you want the pilot on that jet going, oh, I could never do this, man. This is way too hard. Is that what you want him thinking? You don't want that guy. You want him thinking like, bro, I got this. It's when the concept of humility gets out of control where you think, not only am I able to do this, I don't need to prepare for it anymore. And there's a very narrow band of where ego is exactly what you need, but you need it to be under control. And the way Leif and Jocko describe it in dichotomy, I have stolen this, is you want to be humble but not passive, but you want to be confident and not cocky. So it's this perfect blend of confidence and humility, because either in either direction is bad. If you're like, oh, I could never do this, you're screwed. And that's a bad attitude to have in bad situations. You know that as well as I know. But the same is true, which is like, bro, this is no factor, dude. Like
we don't need to train.
Yeah. Actually, this is going to be a problem. You landing on that ship, you on this assault, if you go to a place like, dude, I'm going to burn a nail and just walk in there with my rifle slung, you are arrogant. It's much more common for me, and I think for most people, for their egos to get out of control in the arrogant side than on the passive side, but it's not universal. And it's the narrow band. Ego is a great thing until you get out of control. And Jason Gardner, good friend of mine, probably someone you know really well, he defined it, and I've stolen this, is humility is simply a measurement of how much control you have over your ego. We all have an ego, dude. All of us. We all have an ego. Humility is how much control you have over your ego. The more humble you are, the more you can control it and harness the good parts in it. The less humble you are, the more the thing gets out of control. And out of the control in either direction is bad.
Yeah. Have there ever been times where at home in your personal life that you've found yourself having to like remind your own self to follow your own advice?
Freaking every day.
Every day? It's that often?
Dude, maybe not every day, but I will tell you, plot where it happens the most infinitely more in my personal life than certainly in my professional life and in my work life. There is no doubt that is where I struggle the most. I think that is true for everybody. It is by far the hardest because, dude, it's impossible for me to, this is the woman I love more than anything in the world and 3 human beings that I've helped create. My ego is painted all over those people. And it is by far the biggest challenge. I will say I am pretty good at it. Not perfect. But if I'm going to struggle, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be in my personal life.
Is there an example that is fresh? How much time do we have?
Come on, man.
Well, because I think that that's an important.
It's
like
super
being
important.
able to say this happened.
Yeah,
I mean, if anybody can relate, it's to that.
totally. Well, I'll tell you what. As I wrote the book, and I was trying to come up with examples in the book of what I wanted to write about, I was really shying away from my personal life because it was uncomfortable, a little bit like nervous to admit it, and a little bit raw and like, oh man, let's tell about Dave Berke, the super husband here, or Dave Berke, the super father. I came to the conclusion that the best way to do this is to write about personal things because that was an area where I thought was relevant, all these military stories. I came home from Iraq. I'll paraphrase it. I landed in San Diego Airport. I know you know that airport well. And we were living in base housing in Pacific Beach. I don't know if I remember I told you, like, the cool thing about going to Iraq was I had guaranteed orders into San Diego. So my wife was already there. She lived in San Diego while I was deployed. She picks me up from the airport in a Jeep Grand Cherokee. We drive from the airport to Pacific Beach, like, I don't know, 15-minute drive. By the time I got off the freeway and got onto the side street, I was screaming at her. From the driver's seat, I was driving the car home. And I was screaming at her because she was talking too much and wasn't paying attention to the street. And I just unloaded on her. And it was almost like an out-of-body experience. And my mom, by the way, was in the back seat of the car. And it was almost like I wasn't the one doing it. But it was a complete loss of, like, awareness, complete loss of my emotions, a complete loss of my self-control. And the sound of my own voice kind of like, I don't know if the word like woke me up or whatever. And like the look on her face. But I'm absolutely in my life historically, I have been at my worst with her. Some of it is stuff that I just I couldn't differentiate 7 months of being in a Humvee. Just, why are these people talking? Stop talking. There's no talking in the vehicle. And also just the complacency of the person you're with all the time, where you get lazy. And I have a tendency to do that. I hate having to admit that, but it's just a fact. And that happened. And that happened 15 minutes after I got home.
Yeah. I got to tell you, it's super refreshing hearing you share that, though, because I think part of the intimidation, I think, for Echelon Front, and I mean this in a good way and with the utmost respect, is that there is this almost presence and image of perfection, and that, like, never lose your temper, never make mistakes, always get it right.
Yeah.
Because Jocko exudes that in so many ways, and that trickles down throughout the entire organization. And I think, to me, those are the most valuable stories in terms of making it relatable to potential customers, clients, everyday people who are digesting the information, is to say, like, man, this guy has had the same kind of struggles that I have had. And I think that that's just so enormously valuable, and appreciate you sharing it.
No, I'm happy to, I appreciate the question. Jocko is definitely the bar. I will look at you in the camera in your eyes and be like, I am nowhere near perfect. No, like nowhere near perfect. I'm very lucky to have a framework that I've come to understand really well and I can apply it most of the time well. That book, if you wanna see Dave Berke's weaknesses, I made a commitment when I wrote that, like, every chapter is a very unflattering story about me. Yeah. Some are recent, some are old, but I felt the only way to come across authentically is to, like, I did not want to write the story about yelling at my wife.
Yeah.
I did not want to write that story. I didn't want to write the story about having a meltdown in the F-22 simulator because I didn't know how to fly a freaking airplane. Yeah. There's a chapter about my daughter in there. Like, there are some ones it's like, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
But to your point, I don't know if there's a better way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been through a ton of similar circumstances personally, and that's why I ask. I think, to me, it actually makes a ton of sense why most people who are in entrepreneurship, leadership, high stakes kind of professional environments struggle the most at home. And to me, there's two reasons. One is when emotion runs high, logic runs low. There's a ton of emotion at home because it's people you helped create, it's people that, that see you at your worst, or right when you wake up before you go, they see you in times where you don't have your professional hat on. And so there's a ton of emotion wrapped up into that, which clouds your judgment. The other thing too, and this is something I've noticed, I sell personal protection dogs to high net worth folks and have for, almost 20 years. And I was early on, I found myself really fascinated at that dichotomy of seeing people who are a certain way at work. They're just a fucking pit bull in the office, in the boardroom or whatever, and they're the exact opposite at home. And at first I didn't get it, and then there wasn't like a specific light switch moment, but it all of the sudden made sense. And that it's like, when you do that all day long, when you come home, you want the exact opposite of that, and it's like, I don't want to decide what's for dinner. I don't care what Sally's going to wear to her school picture tomorrow. I don't care where we go on vacation. Can you just plan it?
Yeah.
And so it's this weird, like, polar opposite personality of what they're known for. But to me, that's also refreshing in that, because it's like you have to have that yin and yang balance. There has to be a relinquishment of that, or you're going to lose your mind.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you talk, there's no question that my patience is thinnest with my wife, and my expectations are highest with my kids.
Yeah.
Sometimes unreasonable. And if I'm going to struggle, that's where I'm going to struggle.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part for me. And I think I take comfort in knowing, I think that is true for most of us.
Yeah.
That our family life is where it's going to be the toughest.
Yeah.
Applying these principles at home is the hardest thing to do.
For sure it is. Yeah. And I'll put myself in that same category. Like, I find myself doing the exact same things that early on I was like, why is this the case? And now I'm like, I'm doing the exact same thing. It's like, I completely understand it. Now, maybe that was my light switch moment, is as it transitioned more into that type of dynamic, that I found myself wanting to escape it in my personal life.
I don't understand why my kids just can't be perfect. It doesn't seem that hard. I mean,
It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Just a couple of kind of current events type questions.
Yeah.
Not so much politics, but just,
Yeah.
The shift in administration is considerably different from, the previous administration, and specifically because of our experience being military veterans. Hegseth recently had a kind of a come to Jesus with a bunch of senior leadership, and really kind of hit the reset button on standards, physical fitness, appearance, et cetera. I'm curious, what is your take and reception on his speech to the generals, and what do you think of it overall?
So I don't have direct on the interactions itself. Here's what I think. Two things. One is alignment is really important, and sometimes the best way to get it is from the horse's mouth. Especially when you live in this totally, distributed world that is the military. I mean, how do you get attached to command in Japan, attached to command, and it is a very distributed world, which I think is a good thing. But the correlation you just made is one of the best measurements of alignment is when we're not following basic standards. So if you work for me, you're out in, it doesn't even have to be a military example, but you work for me, you're on some other location, some other site, some other department, some other facility, whatever. And I show up here and there or whatever, and like, you guys are showing up late, they're not using the right equipment correctly, they're not following safety protocols, they're whatever, out of shape. That's a problem. Actually, that's a leadership problem between you and me. It's not, your people aren't the problem. Them not following the standards. So I think the parallel there to me is like, if you get a sense that those things, what we consider, and you do is standard, those are standards. Those aren't like subjective ways to operate. Those aren't like tactical disagreements. I want to go north, you want to go south, I want to use this weapon. These are standards. Yeah. So I think when you have an awareness that you don't think the standard, and this is true for any organization, you have an alignment problem with your organization. And that alignment, to me, you can discuss all day long. There's an up and down. I don't mean to say that it has to work in one direction, but it starts at the top.
Yeah. Did you listen to his speech?
I did not.
You did. Yeah, well, I guess I can't. I could ask what you thought of it, but if you didn't listen to it, then
I didn't. And I will. My get out of jail free card is this last month. I've been very fortunate to be focused on my very self-centered ventures of my book launch.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess where I've seen the biggest, I would say, confrontation or heartburn with what he said is more how he said it, which is what I wanted to
like
ask.
how we deliver. Yeah,
yeah. It's just like if you could critique, his delivery of the message, if you had any.
What was the criticism, or what's the feedback on it?
Well, I mean, to me, most of it was very like PC. Like he's fat shaming people, and it's like it's a standard. It's not fat shaming. It's the thing with like the thing I keep seeing repeated is no more fat generals. It's like, hey, if our E3s who are going to war have this standard, so do you guys. Now granted, it's going to be applicable to your age and rank, and like there is some variance in standard based on your age. It's not even rank, but still there's a standard, and you generals who there's no way you're passing a PT test and probably not even taking it. That's going to change. And all of you are going to at least get in good enough shape to set and display the standard that you're asking everybody underneath you to adhere to. And I agree with all of it.
Yeah, I can't speak to the delivery mechanism, but in terms of like this, like that seems to be a no-brainer to me.
Yeah,
you should be physically fit and be able to pass a physical fitness test,
yeah.
E1 to O10, and everybody in between. And that should be non-controversial.
Agreed.
That is a non-controversial statement to me.
Yeah,
you should be in shape.
Yeah,
You should be able
yeah.
to pass a fitness test.
Yeah. Speaking of standards, are you not allowed to grow a beard working for Echelon Front? Can I ask that? Can you answer that?
If that is a rule, it is an unwritten rule.
Because none of you have them, right?
None of us do. My assumption would be is like nobody would even think about doing it. And if there's ever a time I say I've never been asked that question before, so I haven't thought about it. But I would never. There is a professionalism component, I think, that we carry subconsciously, as an example from Leif and Jocko, that it would never occur to me to not shave.
Are you saying I'm unprofessional?
100%.
I think you.
Actually, what I'm saying is I'm jealous. Yes.
Well, can you not grow a beard? Is that the part of the problem?
No, I don't. I don't think there's a rule that says that. No, there's certainly not like a rule.
I mean, physically, like.
Oh, I could totally grow a beard.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Can we make a deal where, like, if this show gets 1 million views, you have to grow a beard?
Yes.
Will you make that deal?
I'm done.
All right. You heard it here first. We're going to have to clip this.
I'm on camera.
1 million views, Dave Berke's going to grow a beard. I asked Jocko about that. He kind of tap danced around.
What did he, yeah.
It was just like, no, not really. I don't like him. And I was like, all right, well, don't answer the question then. That's fine. Yeah, I just, it was something I noticed, I guess. Like, none of you guys have beards. I'm curious about that. But from a military standpoint, as someone who spent, a very unique experience of really high level in the fighter pilot side, but also, a significant amount of time in the thickest of thick on the ground. What do you think that the U.S. military's biggest concern readiness-wise is over the next 5 years?
Oh, man. Readiness. I got to be careful with saying this, not how I say it, but I think it's a topic people understand, but I think the pace at which things have changed. When I hear things, what carrier strike groups are doing with the Houthis 6 months ago, and it sounds like they're talking about futuristic sci-fi novels. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're describing things they're doing that literally sound like sci-fi novels. There's a component there of like our traditional version of readiness, I think, is like very historical, like number of times, you've done this run, or number of times you've had this flight, a number of events you've done to get this certification. I'm sure aviation's not too much different from other. There's, I think, a risk of the traditional paradigm of what we consider ready doesn't match the pace at which things are changing. And I'm getting that. The reason I said I have to be careful is that there's an anecdotal component to the feedback I'm getting of what carriers are doing. And I'm like, that doesn't sound even real. Like, what are you talking about? Drone components, interactive, autonomous, using weapon systems in ways they weren't designed to be used kind of things. I never trained like that. We never had that inherent malleability, flexibility, plasticity component. I don't know if our readiness metrics consider how do you train for inherent flexibility.
Yeah.
And so rather than pinpoint like, oh, it's this skill set or this thing, it's the intellect that's required at the lowest levels in the organization to be hyper flexible to a scenario that you didn't prepare for.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense the way I'm saying that? Like,
no, for sure.
the scenario, yeah, because I'm hearing stuff like they're talking about what they're doing. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been out since '08, and even 10 years ago, I remember guys talking about components of their kit and stuff. I'm like, I have no idea what you're even talking about, and now it's 10x worse.
It is.
Yeah.
And the last year or two, hearing things like, man, I don't, what's the training module for that?
Yeah.
So that's the readiness piece of that curve is super, super steep and very hard to predict. You have to have a lot of flexibility and inherent autonomy to be responsive to that. Training for that is hard.
Yeah. Do you know how many flight hours you have in total?
I have probably 2,850-ish.
In all of that.
Just under 3,000, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's significant. In all of that time, was there ever an instance where you were unsure of what you were encountering, UAP, UFO wise?
Oh no,
Never.
I'm unremarkable and boring in that regard. Yeah.
Do you know anybody that's ever?
I totally do.
Yeah.
In fact, people I've seen on podcasts, I know who they are.
Yeah.
And there's a debate in my own mind because I'll hear people that I know and be like, how did I spend 3,000 hours in 20 years flying airplanes? I have zero experience like that. So I am fascinated by that conversation due to my own inactivity in that realm.
Is there any part of you that wishes you had encountered something?
No, because I think it'd be a hard thing to wrestle with. Now, I'll say this very carefully.
You're very calculated.
I have been given insight to things that have helped me understand certain things. Go, oh, I didn't know that existed. That's pretty interesting.
That could be confused.
Yes, easily. But that doesn't account for all of it. So there's a part of me going, man, how? And I think the challenge is, how is someone having to wrestle with that? I am very sympathetic to the idea of having to grapple with something that does not make sense in a world where I will tell you, like, as a single seat, like, control freak, understanding, fitting thing, like there's an intellectual demand signal of clarifying and rectifying and being clear about things. That's a hard thing to have to grapple with.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 'cause the thing that the videos that I've seen that give me the most, like, man, I don't know about that feeling, or the Tic Tac looking things that disappear underwater and then shoot up out of it. And it's like, what could explain that? Like, I don't know of anything. Again, I've been out of the loop for a while.
That makes two of us.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Actually, I guess not even foreign policy, national policy wise, from a military standpoint, we've seen the current administration utilizing National Guard troops and military forces in U.S. cities for a law enforcement or crowd control type of capacity. Do you agree or disagree with that, or what is your opinion on that?
These are no joke questions, man. You're coming right at it. I think the concept that I have come to understand when we think about a dichotomy in general is that there's a balance to all this. And so it's not, you cannot look at this as black and white. It's 100% right or 100% wrong. You can see scenarios by which you get to the extremes and either you have a problem, but at the same time too, there is, I think, there's a nuance to that cannot be overlooked. And if you operate in the extremes, you're going to have a problem. And if you operate with balance, you're going to be okay. And I think you have to have the flexibility to be willing to say you can do things that you haven't done before that can work when done correctly, while still being open-minded to the idea that, like, hey, dude, you can't just run to the extreme on either side. We will never, ever, ever do this ever. Like, well, hang on. Like, that's a crazy thing to say. What do you mean never? Or this can be done with zero concern. Like, no, you should be paying attention to that. I think if you operate with balance and nuance, you can find a reason to do all sorts of things that we might be closed-minded to.
Yeah. If you were president, would you allow, or would you, I guess, just allow military forces to act in a law enforcement capacity in U.S. cities?
I'd be very careful with that.
Yeah.
I'd be very careful with that. And I don't have a big law enforcement background, and I don't want to speak with some degree of certainty on that, but those are two very different things. And I think sometimes there's this assumption that we have understanding, because we work with weapons, we work with that environment, we understand what that mission is, and they're very, very different.
Is it possible for you to reduce it to a yes or no?
What was the question again?
Would you, if you were the president, would you allow National Guard troops in U.S. cities in the capacity that they're being used currently?
I could not answer that as a yes or no without knowing what they're going to be doing. If it's a blanket statement should you do it? The answer is yes, but and there's a big but inside there.
Yeah.
You put a young. I've worked with a lot of young kids, smart, sharp kids. When they get out of their familiarity, we can make bad decisions that make situations much worse. You got to be very careful with that.
Yeah. To me, the first part of it is if it's asked for. To me, that's the most obvious, because there are situations where it's, yes, we would love your help.
Because that's a de-escalation tool rather than an escalation tool. Yeah.
Chicago and I think San Francisco, if the governor and the mayor are saying, no, we don't want them here, I feel like you have to respect that. No matter how much you hate to see the decay of a city, it's like the people in charge there are saying, we've got it. So it's the town's population to now decide, do we want this person representing us or not? To me, that's the biggest problem is when it's unsolicited. I don't see that being a positive step necessarily.
I think also, especially too, if you're going to think that you understand what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and you're like, oh, this is a police officer, that's a Marine. Marine's the wrong example. National Guardsman. The direct link between those two is that's, I think, is a major problem as well. That person doesn't know how to do what that person does, what that person is doing. I didn't think of it in those terms as you brought it up, but I think that is a significant element, because the intent behind that is to de-escalate a situation. And if there's resistance to that, you might have the exact opposite effect.
Yeah. I can't imagine a bunch of 0300s in Chicago.
I mean, think about it. Think about 18-year-old Mike as a SEAL. Hey, I want you to do whatever this particular, that doesn't translate without a ton of training and consideration.
Yeah. No.
That's why I have that. This is a huge butt inside there.
Yeah. Yeah. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
Oh, dude. This has been freaking awesome, man. I didn't even anticipate half of these questions.
Well, that means I'm doing my job.
You're doing your job. And I mean that in a good way. This has been so much fun.
I appreciate it. Likewise.
What I've asked, dude, every question's been awesome. This has been the most fun I've had in a long time on a podcast,
That's great.
man.
That's awesome, man. I love to hear it.
Really appreciate you making me talk about my wife and what a terrible husband. So it's great. It's been lots of fun.
Experiences. I do have a few Patreon questions if we can knock those out.
Yeah.
Quick.
What is a Patreon question?
So I have a Patreon page or channel where it's behind the scenes footage or people who subscribe on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I got you.
They can submit questions. So I asked them.
This is for specific.
Yeah.
Totally, dude.
So my patrons have submitted questions that they want me to ask you.
Fire away. Can't be any harder than what you just did. Yeah. This is awesome.
So Claire asked the top 5 no way moments you had watching either of the Top Gun movies.
All right. 5? Come on, Claire.
Or however many.
All right. No way the students beat the instructors.
Yeah.
Not even close. So that first movie, Maverick, no way. Yeah. Not even close. No way a student is rogue. I'm leaving my wingman. I know it's movie, but does nothing like that in real life. No way we fly under a bridge, knife edge, to get to a target. I'm getting all sorts of grief on social media about Sam's we don't fly underneath 10-foot wide bridges. So those are 3 really good no ways. No way we're doing that.
Is my maybe lack of understanding on the second movie, for me, there was an enormous plot hole that almost ruined it.
Don't you dare.
Do you need to use fighter jets for that?
Don't you dare.
Like, SAMs would work just Tomahawks.
My favorite thing is like, hey, all the Tomahawks that blew up that airfield in the
Could
beginning,
have just-
why didn't they just say,
Yeah.
yeah? And my answer is, don't you dare.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. Off limits, got it. Justin, can anybody else say they've flown the F-18 Hornet, F-22, F-35, and also the F-16 since that was left out? I guess you already mentioned
Yeah, in the spirit of being like highly evasive in my answers, I do not think so.
Yeah.
It is possible in the last year or two. I'm a dinosaur man, and maybe it's happened, but I really don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, there should be some kind of plaque or something for that, right? I mean, or like I don't know, an Aviator Hall of Fame, something?
Yeah, in my office. If you go to my office.
Yeah. Do you got to have some cool shit in your office.
I got a couple cool things in my office.
Ashley says, my dad was with the 419th at one point. I don't know what that is. Maybe you do. When the F-22 rolled out, it was a bid for the best, and the competition included lots of shit-talking and good old squadron games. Do you recall a sense of competition when the F-22 was announced?
Like when the F-22 was like rolled out between the F-22 and its competitors, the other like the other aircraft it was competing with.
I apologize. I'm actually not 100% sure.
So I'll answer both. One, if there is, when they were announcing the F-22 versus YF-22, YF-23, the two airplanes competing for the 5th gen, ton of competitiveness, even some controversy. Was the F-23 better? And there's a network out there on social media, and you can find them like that we should have picked the YF-23. So
really,
yeah, it
what's
was
different about it?
Well, I mean, this is 30 years ago now. You know, the Black Widow was like, it was more stealthy. There's a bunch of things in the history of maybe it was a better airplane. Obviously, we're never going to know. But to her point, like, yeah, ton of that. To this day, it kind of goes down as they call it the greatest fighter never built.
Oh, really?
And if you look at pictures of it, if anybody searches up YF-23, it is a badass looking airplane.
Do you know what company was it? Raytheon versus Boeing kind of thing? Or?
Well, McDonnell Douglas / Boeing. Yeah, it was pre-merger and all that stuff. But yes, it was Lockheed was the YF-22, and I think McDonnell Douglas. And it's a consortium like Northrop and different. But I think the prime was McDonnell Douglas versus Lockheed.
Raytheon doesn't make planes, do they?
They make missiles that blow up.
That shows
airplanes.
you what I know about.
It's all good, man. That's why I'm here. Bring me back. I'll answer these questions all day long.
Get you a consultant fee here. Man, for me, interviewing is an absolute honor and privilege to be able to do it. This similarly is one of the most fun interviews I've done.
Awesome.
It's been just
so cool.
A total pleasure to be able to get to ask you so many of the 6-year-old me watching Top Gun and just getting to pick your brain and hear all your stories and such a once in a lifetime unique opportunity in so many experiences that nobody else has. I mean, you have such a unique perspective and breadth of experience that just nobody else has it. And you throw in the on the ground stuff, and it's just like, dude, you have a unicorn career. It's just there's just nothing like it.
It's crazy, man.
But I really can't thank you enough for coming and sharing. It's been an honor to do.
Dude, this is the coolest thing, and I mean that. And if you'd have told 16-year-old Dave Berke that the 1 year out of the cockpit would be the most memorable year of your life, running with a bunch of Navy SEALs, I would not have believed you.
Yeah.
That was an honor too. So being here, man, this means a lot. Thank you.
No, thank you. One thing I was going to ask: do you have any concept or idea of what a 6th generation plane would be called? Like any of the nomenclature? Is it at that point yet? No,
the only thing I know right now is kind of like the acronyms they're using for like the advanced next gen stuff. So I don't know what they're gonna Lightning or Raptor. I don't know what they're gonna call it.
Any idea when Gen 6 would roll out?
I think you're gonna see a legit platform. I don't know about like full production, but I think you're gonna see a platform in the next 5 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. It'll be interesting times for sure.
It will be a dinosaur moment for me.
Yeah.
Because it'll be, I get to stay relevant because I flew F-22s and F-35s, even though I did it a while ago, because those are the prominent things. This will be like, you're an old man, Dave Berke.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. Thank you again for coming. Got some memorabilia for being on the show. I don't know if you're a shit kicker wearing kind of guy, but
This is awesome, man.
in the black box. There's a couple of Marcus Aurelius quotes on the coin, which I think you guys could appreciate. But if you, again, I'm going to add to our deal with the beard. If we get 1 million, even if it's just a picture of you rocking what's in that black box with a beard doing an Echelon front event, like I can die a happy man. So.
Right on. All right. Let's see what we can do. I'll have to talk to Jocko about this one. This is awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. I know we got to get you back on a plane here, which you got
good.
to relinquish that pilot control, which I know is tough. But
Indeed.
Thank you again. I appreciate everything.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. To the listener/viewer, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.